Kaylin froze in the middle of her own living room, the place she once decorated with joy, the place she once believed would hold her future. But today, it felt foreign, too quiet, too cold, too unfamiliar, not because of the furniture or the walls, but because of the woman standing in the doorway, tapping her manicured nails against a gold bracelet engraved with 2 initials. A.S. Aubrey Sloan. Aubrey looked around with a slow sweep of confidence, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor as if she'd practiced entering rooms that didn't belong to her. She smiled, not warmly, not politely, just enough to show she believed she'd already won. "You need to move out by the end of the week," she said, her voice smooth but sharp. "Rowan wants me here now." For a moment, Kaylin didn't breathe. This was her home, her marriage, her life, yet she stood there being told to walk away, as if she were just a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. Her stomach tightened, heat rising to her face as Aubrey rested one hand on the counter, causing the bracelet to slide down her wrist. The same bracelet Kaylin found in Rowan's car weeks ago, the one she prayed had an explanation. There wasn't. The truth stood right in front of her, smirking. Kaylin's throat tightened. "You're in my house." Aubrey shrugged lightly. "He said it works better if I get settled sooner rather than later. Hope you've started packing." Before Kaylin could speak again, her mind replayed the moment from that morning, barely hours ago, when Rowan walked into the kitchen looking like he'd made a decision he didn't plan to discuss. She remembered the coldness in his voice, the stiffness in his stance. The stack of papers he dropped onto the counter without warning, divorce papers. He didn't sit down. He didn't offer a conversation. He didn't acknowledge the confusion in her eyes. He simply slid the documents toward her and said, "It's time we go separate ways, Kaylin." Her breath had caught in her chest. "Separate ways? Rowan, what is this? Where is this coming from?" He didn't flinch. "I'm seeing someone." Her heart had cracked instantly, but she forced her voice to stay steady. "Someone?" "Aubrey," he said plainly. "She fits my life better than you ever did." The words hadn't just hurt, they sliced, because they came from the man who once claimed she grounded him, the man who said she softened the hardness he carried inside, the man who promised she would never feel out of place by his side. Now he was choosing someone else and telling her to give up the home they built together. A home she filled with memories he no longer wanted. Back in the present, Aubrey tilted her head with a small grin, as if she'd waited for Kaylin to break. Kaylin did not. She lifted her chin, even though her chest felt heavy. "He didn't tell me you'd be walking into the house today." Aubrey shrugged. "He doesn't owe you updates anymore." That sentence hit like a blow. Kaylin's hands curled at her sides, not in anger, but to steady herself. Her eyes drifted around the living room, photographs still on the shelves, her throw blankets still hanging over the couch, the scent of the candles she liked still filling the air. This was her space, her life, her heart, and yet she was being pushed out by someone who hadn't contributed to any of it. Aubrey's voice broke the silence. "Don't take this personally. Rowan and I are just aligned, as if love were a business contract and Kaylin was the one who failed to meet corporate standards." Kaylin's pulse pounded in her ears, but she refused to give Aubrey the satisfaction of seeing her break. She gathered her breath and steadied her voice. "You're here early. You could have waited until I left." Aubrey smirked. "I didn't want to waste time. You know how it is." Kaylin didn't respond. There was nothing to say to someone who entered another woman's home claiming ownership of something she didn't build. Aubrey stepped past her, examining the dining table Kaylin chose the month they married. She touched the back of a chair, like she already owned it. "So, like I said," Aubrey continued casually, "end of the week. Rowan wants this transition smooth." Transition. Home was now a transition. Marriage was now an inconvenience. Kaylin swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe through the storm rising inside her. She would not fall apart in front of this woman. She wouldn't give Rowan that satisfaction either. She took one step back, lifting her chin. "This conversation ends here." Aubrey raised an eyebrow. "You sure? We could—" "I said," Kaylin repeated quietly but firmly. "It ends here." With that, she walked out of the living room with the remnants of her dignity held tightly in her grip. Her heart ached, her chest burned, but her spine stayed straight. Behind her, Aubrey's smirk lingered, strong enough to show she believed she had already replaced Kaylin completely. But the story was far from over, and Rowan had no idea how much his decision would cost him. "Bestie, before we go any further, let me ask you, And everyone listening, something real. Have you ever poured yourself into someone with everything you had, only to learn they were handing the best parts of you to someone who never earned it? Have you ever tried to hold a home together while the person you loved acted like you were just a temporary guest? Have you ever stayed loyal to someone who treated your loyalty like a weakness? Because that's where Kaylin stood, in her living room, in the place she once filled with laughter, warmth, and hope, facing a woman wearing her husband's attention like a trophy. Some of us know that feeling too well. You give love honestly. You give support freely. You try to believe in someone, even when they stop believing in you. But they drift. They grow distant. They start choosing ease over commitment. They look everywhere except at the heart that stood beside them. And suddenly, the person who promised forever becomes a stranger holding decisions that break you in one move. Tell me, bestie, have you ever held on to someone long after they let go of you? Have you ever convinced yourself it was just stress, just work, just a phase, when the truth was sitting right in front of you the whole time? Kaylin did everything right. She loved, she supported, she showed up, she built a life brick by brick with the man she believed saw her value. But loyalty cannot hold a marriage together when the other person is already choosing someone else behind closed doors. Have you ever found something, an item, a text, a clue, and your heart knew exactly what it meant before your mind accepted it? That was Kaylin with the bracelet, those initials, that floral scent on Rowan's collar, the emotional distance she kept pretending wasn't real. She stayed loyal. She stayed present. She stayed hopeful. But sometimes hope hurts more than the truth. So ask yourself, have you ever given someone your whole heart only to realize they were using it to patch holes in someone else's ego? Have you ever been so committed to a relationship that you didn't see how close you were to disappearing inside it? Because Kaylin wasn't just losing a home. She wasn't just losing a husband. She was losing the version of herself she carried into that marriage. The woman who believed love was stronger than someone's personal ambition. And if you've ever been there, bestie, you know the pain hits long before the breakup happens. This part of her story isn't just about heartbreak. It's about recognition. Recognition of the moment you stop lying to yourself. Recognition of the moment you ask, how did I get here? Recognition of the moment someone tries to walk over you, believing you won't stand up. Kaylin didn't know it then, but her strength was already forming, not because she wanted it, but because betrayal forces a woman to remember who she really is. And if you've ever been pushed into rediscovering your own strength, you understand her more than she even understands herself right now. Let's speak plainly for a moment, bestie. A woman can endure stress. A woman can endure uncertainty. A woman can even endure seasons of distance with someone she loves. But disrespect, that is where the line must be drawn. And what Kaylin faced wasn't just disrespect. It was a blow straight to her dignity. Think about it. She wasn't dealing with a simple argument. She wasn't dealing with miscommunication. She wasn't dealing with a marriage going through a rough patch. She was watching another woman walk into her home with confidence, wearing a bracelet she didn't buy, carrying a relationship she didn't build, acting as though Kaylin's entire life could be cleared out by the end of the week. That's not just betrayal. That's humiliation. That's someone trying to erase you while you're still standing in the room. And the worst part? It wasn't just Aubrey. It was Rowan, the man she trusted more than anyone. Rowan wasn't confused. He wasn't lost. He wasn't unsure of what he wanted. He made a choice, a deliberate, calculated choice. He chose to hand his loyalty to someone who fed his ego over someone who nurtured his growth. He chose attention over the woman who grounded him. He chose convenience over commitment. And when he looked Kaylin in the eye and said, "She fits my life better than you ever did," he wasn't just ending a marriage. He was trying to redefine her worth. That cuts deep, because no matter how strong a woman is, hearing the person you built a life with dismiss your presence like you were never enough, that pain stays with you. Some of you listening right now know exactly what that feels like. To give love with honesty, to build with intention, to sacrifice quietly for someone who never understood the weight of your effort, only for them to treat you like an option. So let's call it what it is. A woman can survive heartbreak. She can even rise from abandonment. But disrespect shakes her core. Because disrespect says, you don't matter here. You're replaceable. Your effort meant nothing. In that living room, Kaylin wasn't standing in confusion. She was standing in a moment that told her everything she tried to deny. She wasn't losing Rowan. She was losing the illusion of who Rowan pretended to be, and that realization stings more than the breakup itself. This is the emotional wound. It's not that he left. It's how he left. It's why he left. It's who he became while leaving. Kaylin deserved honesty. She deserved gratitude. She deserved respect. Instead, Rowan handed her eviction from her own life without a hint of remorse. Bestie. When a woman reaches that point, when she stands in the middle of the pain, with nothing but her integrity holding her up, the world shifts for her. Because that's when strength begins, not when she fights, not when she argues, not when she begs, but when she finally understands. This disrespect is where I stop breaking myself to make someone else comfortable. And that is exactly where Kaylin is standing now, right at the edge of the life she once knew, facing the truth she can't unsee. Bestie, stay with me, because this is where the story starts turning in ways nobody, not even Rowan, saw coming. Right now, all Kaylin sees is the loss, the marriage collapsing, the home slipping from her grasp, the woman in her living room acting like she holds the deed to Kaylin's entire life. But life has a way of flipping tables when people least expect it. So let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone treat you like you were easy to discard, only for life to circle back and show them exactly what they threw away? Have you ever been pushed out of a space you built with your bare hands, only to discover later that you never truly belonged there because something better was waiting? Because that's where this story is headed. Rowan believed he was choosing an upgrade. He believed he was stepping into a life more aligned with his image. He believed he could push Kaylin aside and step forward without consequence. But bestie, let me tell you this gently. Life does not reward dishonor. And the same door he forced her out of, the one he thought would open to comfort, ease, and admiration, is the same door that's going to show him everything he misjudged. Kaylin is walking into a chapter she didn't plan for, but she is not walking into failure. She is walking into clarity, because when betrayal hits this hard, it doesn't break you permanently, it breaks you open. And through that opening, truth walks in. Truth about who she is, truth about what she deserves, truth about the life she was meant to build outside of someone else's shadow. Rowan has no idea what's coming. He thinks he won. He thinks replacing his wife with a woman who feeds his ego will bring him peace. But the deeper this story goes, the more he'll realize he didn't just lose a partner. He lost the foundation that kept him steady. Meanwhile, Kaylin is about to step into connections, opportunities, and a level of strength she never thought she had. That's the twist I want you to hold on to. Because betrayal is loud, but transformation is louder. And before this story ends, Rowan will face something he never expected, regret. Not the casual kind, not the soft kind, but the kind that hits harder when he sees Kaylin rise into a life he never imagined she'd grow strong enough to claim. So, stay with me, because everything you just witnessed, the coldness, the dismissal, the humiliation, it's only the setup. This story shifts. Not for Rowan, not for Aubrey, but for the woman who walked out with nothing except dignity and comes back with everything she earned. Bestie, the twist waiting for Rowan? He created it himself. Kaylin stood near the doorway as Aubrey moved deeper into the living room, touching items that didn't, that belonged to her, acting as if she had earned the right to place judgment on a life she never lived. Aubrey paused beside the large framed photo taken on Kaylin and Rowan's first anniversary. The two of them smiling by Lake Michigan with their coats wrapped tight against the Chicago breeze. It was a moment filled with love, one Kaylin believed would set the tone for every year after. Aubrey traced the edge of the frame with her finger. "I'll take this down later," she said casually. "Rowan and I want the space to reflect us." Kaylin's heart jolted, not because Aubrey touched the frame, but because of the quiet boldness in her tone, a tone that carried certainty, a tone that said she believed she belonged here more than Kaylin ever did. "We," Kaylin repeated under her breath. Aubrey didn't look back. Yes, he wants a new energy in the house, one that aligns with him. The word aligns felt like a slap. Kaylin wasn't perfect, but she never pretended to be anything other than what she was, real, loving, grounded. Aubrey continued walking through the space, tapping her bracelet against tables, countertops, surfaces, letting those initials catch the light like a trophy. AS. The reminder stung each time it flashed. Kaylin finally found her voice. "You don't get to rewrite a history you weren't here to build." Aubrey smirked. "You call it history. Rowan calls it a phase. The words scraped across Kaylin's chest, but she didn't fall apart. She held herself steady, even as everything inside felt like it was sinking. And just when she thought the pain couldn't cut any deeper, her memory replayed the moment Rowan spoke those final words to her hours earlier. She remembered how he stood on the other side of the counter, not a hint of hesitation in his voice, not a flicker of empathy in his face. "She fits my life better than you ever did." It replayed in her mind like a sentence meant to break her twice. He said it without tremor, without softness, without the man she once knew behind his eyes. Those words could have shattered anyone, but something unexpected happened. In that moment, the one replaying inside her chest right now, a part of Kaylin woke up. It wasn't anger. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was clarity, because someone who can look you in the face and speak to you like you were a misplaced detail in their biography was never meant to carry your future anyway. Back in the present, Aubrey turned, finally meeting Kaylin's eyes with a smug stillness. "You'll be fine," she said lightly. "People rebuild." Kaylin didn't answer. She didn't argue. She didn't crumble. She stepped back, letting the air settle around her like she was taking the first breath of a woman stepping out of a life that no longer honored her. This wasn't her ending. This was the moment she learned exactly who she couldn't stay with. Bestie. Before we move deeper into this story, please like this video and drop a comment. It genuinely helps YouTube push our stories to more people who need these messages. Your support keeps this channel thriving. Kaylin Pierce grew up on the south side of Chicago, in a neighborhood where people shared more than walls. They shared life. Her childhood wasn't wrapped in wealth, but it was filled with warmth in ways money couldn't imitate. Her mother, Marlene, worked 2 nursing shifts most days, coming home long after sunset, but still managing to ask Kaylin about her homework, her dreams, and the little moments that made her smile. Their apartment wasn't large, but it felt alive. Neighbors stopping by with leftover food, the sound of kids playing. Outside, aunties laughing during weekend cookouts, and the comfort of knowing someone always had your back. That environment shaped Kaylin. It taught her community over competition. It taught her that success meant lifting others as you rose. It taught her that love wasn't measured by what you could buy, but by how you showed up. When Kaylin earned her acceptance letter to Howard University, her entire block celebrated as if she'd won a championship. Howard wasn't just a school to her, it was a doorway, a place where she refined her voice, sharpened her confidence, and discovered how powerful representation truly was. She majored in technology development, determined to create systems that gave marginalized youth better access to tech opportunities. At Howard, she wasn't just a student, she became a mentor, a tutor, a support system to younger girls adjusting to campus life. She never forgot where she came from, and she carried her Chicago grit with pride. After graduation, Kaylin moved back closer to home while working remotely on tech-based nonprofit projects. She spent late nights designing educational programs and early mornings speaking at youth events. Her life wasn't glamorous, but it was full, rooted, purposeful, loved. Every Sunday she called her mother before making a simple dinner of baked chicken or pasta. Every holiday she returned home with gifts she couldn't always afford, but gave anyway. She dropped by community centers to offer free workshops, reminding kids who looked like her that they belonged in spaces people told them were out of reach. To the outside world, she wasn't a headline, but to the people who mattered, she was a light. Kaylin moved through life grounded, the type of grounded that comes from growing up in a place where neighbors turned into family and every setback came with someone reminding you to keep going. That same grounding is what would later win Rowan Ellis's attention. He came from a world far removed from hers, but it was her steadiness, her softness, mixed with strength, that captivated him long before he knew it would change his life. But Kaylin didn't know then that the very qualities that pulled him in would one day be the ones he claimed no longer suited him. For now, she was simply a young woman living with purpose, deeply connected to her roots, carrying a heart that never learned how to love halfway. She was ready for life to unfold. She was not ready for what love would demand from her next. While Kaylin grew up surrounded by community spirit and shared strength, Rowan Ellis was raised in an entirely different landscape, one shaped by influence, legacy, and polished expectations. Rowan came from a long line of real estate magnates based in Connecticut. The Ellis family wasn't just wealthy, they were respected in circles where money opened doors before a handshake was even offered. Their name appeared on charity buildings, luxury development projects, and the guest lists of events where connections mattered more than sincerity. His childhood existed inside large homes with vaulted ceilings, private tutors, chauffeurs, and vacations that looked more like business networking opportunities than family bonding. His father, a stern man who believed feelings slowed progress, groomed Rowan to lead Ellis development from the time he was old enough to hold a pen. Success wasn't optional for Rowan, it was expected. He attended elite boarding schools where students discussed business futures before they even learned to drive. His friendships were built around mutual benefit. His routine centered on preparing him to inherit responsibility rather than allowing him to explore who he truly wanted to be. And while he excelled in everything handed to him, academics, leadership, roles, public presence, there was always a quiet disconnect in his chest. He knew how to present confidence, how to negotiate, how to impress a boardroom, but he struggled with emotional depth. Not because he lacked the capacity, but because no one ever encouraged him to express it. By the time he entered adulthood, Rowan was the kind of man who moved with certainty and carried authority effortlessly. He took over major projects for the family company, expanded their portfolio across several states, and became known in business circles as someone who executed decisions quickly and cleanly. People admired him. People respected him. People trusted his leadership, but rarely did anyone know him. He was used to admiration without intimacy, partnerships without emotional truth, and relationships that served appearances rather than personal fulfillment. And yet, for all his privilege and access, Rowan often felt disconnected from the world around him, a man surrounded by plenty but lacking grounding. That emptiness is what made Kaylin stand out the night they met. She wasn't impressed by his last name. She didn't adjust her tone because of his position. She didn't treat him like a prize or an opportunity. She spoke to him like a human being, something he had experienced less than people assumed. Rowan was drawn to her authenticity, her passion for community work, and the way she could speak about real-life impact without needing validation from anyone in the room. She didn't chase his attention. She didn't flatter him. She simply existed as herself, steady, insightful, warm. And for the first time in a long time, Rowan felt seen, not as an Ellis, not as a young executive, not as someone carrying a legacy, but as Rowan. He didn't realize then that the very grounding he admired in her would one day be the same grounding he rejected, not because it lacked value, but because he hadn't yet learned how to handle a love that required vulnerability instead of performance. Their worlds were opposites, one built on community, the other on image. But destiny has a way of crossing paths that shouldn't intersect. Soon, those paths would intertwine in ways neither of them could have predicted. It was a warm evening in Atlanta when Kaylin and Rowan's paths crossed for the first time. The city buzzed with its usual energy, but inside the downtown event hall, a different kind of electricity filled the air. The fundraiser brought together young professionals, community leaders, and influential sponsors, all gathered to support initiatives aimed at expanding tech access for underserved youth. Kaylin had been invited as a featured speaker. She wasn't the type to seek spotlight, but her work spoke for her. Her programs helped students in overlooked neighborhoods gain hands-on experience, and her passion for change had earned her recognition from key organizations. She arrived wearing a simple but elegant dress, her hair pulled back neatly, her demeanor calm yet confident. She wasn't there to impress. She was there to represent the communities that shaped her. Across the room, Rowan entered surrounded by board members and company executives. He carried the polished confidence of a man used to commanding attention without asking for it. His suit was tailored, his posture perfect, and every handshake he gave was met with admiration. But even in a crowd designed to flatter him, he couldn't focus. Not once Kaylin stepped onto the stage. The moment she began speaking, the room shifted. Her voice wasn't loud, it was clear. Her presence wasn't commanding, it was steady. She didn't talk numbers or projections like the speakers before her. She talked about children finding hope through opportunity, about creating pathways instead of excuses, about the responsibility of those with influence to uplift those without. She wasn't rehearsed. She was real. Rowan felt something unsteady in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. She spoke with conviction, honesty, and sincerity in a room full of polished personas and rehearsed smiles. When she stepped off the stage, she wasn't swarmed by admirers. She greeted people humbly, accepting compliments with grace but without arrogance. Rowan found himself moving toward her, not because it was strategic, but because Something about her drew him in before his mind even understood why. "Your speech," he began, stopping just a few feet away, "was unlike anything I usually hear at events like this." Kaylin turned to him, not intimidated by his presence. "Is that good or bad?" He cracked a small smile, one that looked unfamiliar on him, even to himself. "Better, much better." "You spoke with belief, not performance." Kaylin chuckled softly. "I don't know how to talk any other way. Children don't benefit from corporate jargon. They benefit from real action." Her answer wasn't crafted to impress him. It was simply the truth. Rowan extended his hand. "I'm Rowan Ellis." "I know," she said politely, shaking his hand. "Your company helped sponsor the program." He nodded. "Yes, but hearing you speak makes me realize there's more we could be doing." They fell into a natural conversation, the kind that didn't feel forced or rushed. Kaylin shared stories from the community, and Rowan listened, truly. Listened, as if he hadn't been given honest perspective in years. She noticed his polished demeanor but saw something deeper beneath it, a man searching for meaning beyond corporate achievements. He noticed her warmth, her intelligence, her strength. She didn't shrink around him or defer to his status. She treated him with the same respect she gave every person in the room. Hours slipped by without them realizing. By the time the event ended, they had exchanged numbers, a simple gesture. But one that carried weight neither of them admitted immediately. From that night on, they were no longer from separate worlds. Something had begun, something sincere, unexpected, and undeniably powerful. Soon, everyone around them would talk about their connection as if it were made of luck. But the truth? It was built from authenticity meeting admiration for the first time in both their lives. Kaylin never believed in fairy tales, but the early days of her marriage to Rowan felt close to one. Not because everything was perfect, but because both of them were trying, genuinely trying to build something real. After a year of dating, they married in an intimate ceremony near Lake Michigan. Rowan insisted on a breathtaking venue overlooking the water, but Kaylin added warmth to every detail. Handwritten vows, a small choir from a community center she volunteered with, and a reception where her mother danced until she laughed herself breathless. Rowan had looked at Kaylin that day as if he finally understood what it meant to feel at home. He bought them a contemporary house just outside of Chicago, a place filled with light, open spaces, and the promise of new beginnings. Kaylin decorated it with touches from her culture, gifts from her neighborhood, back home, and artwork created by emerging black artists she admired. She wanted their home to reflect not just beauty, but meaning. Rowan didn't object. In fact, he praised her for it. "I never knew color could feel warm like this," he once told her, running his fingers over a quilt her grandmother made. "My life always looked good, but it rarely felt like anything." She laughed softly and nudged him. "That's what happens when you focus on looks instead of heart." He held her close, whispering, "You're teaching me." In those early months, they built routines that made their connection stronger. They cooked together, Rowan learning how to season food the way Kaylin's mother taught her. They took walks near the lake, talking about dreams, fears, childhood memories. They spent late nights sharing goals, from Rowan wanting to expand affordable housing units to Kaylin planning new tech programs for underrepresented youth. There was balance. There was joy. There was partnership. When Rowan came home from tough board meetings, Kaylin was his calm. When Kaylin faced obstacles in her community initiatives, Rowan became her strategist, helping her navigate logistics she'd never dealt with before. They laughed often. They held hands effortlessly. They spoke openly, even when it was hard. People around them admired their energy, a man raised in prestige and a woman molded by community strength, coming together in a way that felt refreshing and genuine. For a while, Rowan's world softened. He wasn't constantly trying to impress anyone. He wasn't striving for image. He wasn't hard to reach emotionally. They planned vacations, talked about future children, shared long dinners without checking phones. There were moments when Rowan looked at Kaylin with an expression she'd never forget, gentler than anything he showed publicly, full of gratitude he didn't know how to put into words. Their home felt alive, the kind of alive Rowan never experienced growing up, the kind of alive Kaylin cherished deeply. But life doesn't always stay where it starts. The shift began slowly, so slowly that Kaylin didn't recognize it at first. Longer meetings, more business trips, fewer shared dinners, conversations cut short by new obligations. Still, She tried to hold on to the love they built. She tried to remind him of what they promised. She tried to believe they were just adjusting to new responsibilities. But the early peace, the hope, the laughter, the unity, would soon face a test she didn't see coming. A test that would reveal whether Rowan loved her, or loved the version of himself he thought she helped create. The shift in their marriage didn't strike all at once. It crept in quietly. Small changes that felt harmless at first. Kaylin didn't think much of them, because that's what happens when you love someone. You give grace, even when it costs you pieces of yourself. It started with Rowan working later than usual. At first, he'd text her updates. Running behind. Board meeting went long. Be home soon. Nothing alarming. Kaylin cooked dinner anyway, keeping his plate warm, telling herself that building. A life with a man like Rowan meant there would be demanding seasons. She believed it was temporary, just part of his workload increasing as Ellis development expanded across new cities. But temporary stretched into routine. Dinner plates stayed untouched more often than not. Conversations became shorter, lighter, less intimate. Rowan walked in distracted, loosening his tie without meeting her eyes. Kaylin still reached for him. How was your day? Anything new with the project? Want to talk? He gave clipped answers, brushing off her attempts to connect as if he were somewhere else entirely, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Then came the business trips. Rowan started traveling more frequently. New York, Los Angeles, Dallas, Chicago again for meetings that seemed to multiply overnight. Kaylin wanted to support him. She offered encouragement, sent him meals to his hotel room, stayed up late to talk even when she was tired. But each time he returned, he brought less of himself with him. The embraces became shorter. The eye contact became rare. The conversations felt forced. One evening, he rushed through the door with barely a greeting. "You're home early," she had said with a hopeful smile. "Had to beat traffic," he muttered, dropping his bag and heading straight to his office. No kiss, no warmth, no acknowledgement of the woman who stood beside him for 2 years. Kaylin tried not to overthink. She reminded herself that stress could weigh heavily on anyone, especially someone overseeing massive projects. But a part of her chest tightened every time he brushed past her like she was another task on his list. It was the disappearing affection that hurt the most. The man who once paused everything just to wrap his arms around her now barely noticed when she leaned into him on the couch. The man who once complimented her dresses with a playful grin now didn't lift his head when she entered the room. The man who once promised to share life with her seemed to live in a world she no longer had access to. She tried to talk to him. "Is everything okay? Are we okay? Did I do something wrong?" Each time he dismissed her gently but firmly. "I'm fine. You're overthinking. Work is just heavy right now." But she could feel the distance growing between them like an invisible wall, one she didn't build and didn't know how to tear down. Then came the scent. A soft floral fragrance on his collar one night when he hugged her distractedly. He didn't wear cologne. He never liked it. Kaylin's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to stay calm. Maybe it's from a coworker. Maybe from someone he brushed past during a meeting. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. She wanted to believe anything except the worst, but the emotional silence only grew thicker. Rowan's eyes became harder to read. His schedule became impossible to predict. His presence felt like a visitor drifting in and out of the home they shared. Kaylin didn't want to assume the worst, but every instinct inside her whispered that something was shifting, something deeper than work, something heavier than stress. She just didn't know yet that the truth was already sitting in their home, in the form of a woman who wore a bracelet with the initials AS. The night Kaylin found the bracelet was the night her quiet worries turned into something she could no longer explain away. Rowan had come home from yet another trip, dropping his luggage by the hallway before heading upstairs without more than a distracted greeting. He looked exhausted, but not in the way he used to, not in the "I've worked hard today" way. His exhaustion looked controlled, rehearsed, almost like he was carrying something he didn't want her to see. Kaylin stayed downstairs, cleaning up the living room to clear her thoughts. She tried to brush off the uneasiness pressing against her ribs. She told herself he was just tired, just overwhelmed, just adjusting to a busier schedule. She wanted to believe that, but when she picked up his blazer from the back of the couch to hang it, in the closet something slipped from the pocket and fell onto the floor. A gold bracelet. Sleek, delicate, engraved with 2 letters as. Kaylin stared at it, her breath stuck in her throat. At first she thought it must have belonged to a colleague, maybe something someone dropped accidentally. But the bracelet didn't look lost. It looked intentionally placed, as if it had been kept, not misplaced. And the initials weren't familiar. She held it gently between her fingers, her heart pounding like it was signaling danger she didn't want to acknowledge. The floral scent she noticed on his collar returned to her memory, matching the faint scent on the bracelet. Her mind raced with questions she didn't want to ask. Who was Az? Why was her bracelet in Rowan's pocket? Why didn't he tell her anything about meeting someone who wore something so distinct? And the hardest question of all, why did this feel like the answer she had been afraid of for weeks? Kaylin sat on the edge of the couch, the bracelet resting in her palm. She stared at it long enough for her stomach to twist in knots. Doubt seeped into her chest, mixing with fear and a quiet kind of heartbreak she wasn't ready to name. She didn't confront him that night, not because she was weak, not because she wanted to avoid the truth, but because confronting him meant acknowledging reality, the reality that something serious had shifted in their marriage. She wanted more evidence, more clarity, more certainty before she spoke words she couldn't take back. So she placed the bracelet on the counter, making note of the initials burned into her mind, and tried to sleep. But sleep didn't come. She turned over thoughts, possibilities, reassurances, excuses, anything to soften the ache forming in her chest. When Rowan came downstairs the next morning and saw the bracelet, his expression flickered, just for a moment, before he smoothed it over. "Oh," he said flatly, picking it up. "One of the team members must have dropped this." He didn't explain further. He didn't elaborate. He didn't look her in the eye. He simply pocketed the bracelet again and walked away. And that moment told Kaylin everything she needed to know. He was hiding something. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding, not an accident, but a truth he hoped she wouldn't pursue. Kaylin didn't push. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold on to the idea that her marriage was still salvageable. But the weight of those two letters, Az, stayed with her like a warning she was trying not to hear. She didn't know the woman behind those initials yet, but soon, she would not only meet her, she would find her standing inside her own house. The morning Rowan handed Kaylin the divorce papers began like any other, or at least it pretended to. The sun filtered through the kitchen windows, warming the marble counters she always wiped down after breakfast. The coffee machine hummed softly. Kaylin stood by the stove, stirring eggs the way Rowan liked them, hoping it might bring back a small piece of the man she used to know. She heard his footsteps before she saw him, brisk, heavy, purposeful. Not the relaxed walk of the husband who once kissed her cheek every morning. This was the walk of someone carrying a decision. "Morning," she greeted, turning with a hopeful smile. Rowan didn't respond. He didn't even glance at the pan. Instead, he placed a thick stack of papers on the counter like he was dropping off contracts for her to review. Kaylin frowned slightly. "What's that?" His jaw tightened. He didn't ease into the moment, didn't soften his tone, didn't consider her heart. "It's time we go our separate ways," he said. Her grip on the spatula loosened. "What are you talking about?" Rowan exhaled sharply, as if annoyed that she needed clarity. "These are divorce papers." The words hit her harder than any argument they'd ever had. She felt a sudden chill sweep through her body. "Divorce?" she repeated, barely able to breathe. "Rowan, where is this coming from? We haven't talked about anything serious. We haven't—" "It's not something that needs discussion," he interrupted. She stared at him, stunned. "A marriage needs discussion. A divorce definitely does." Rowan leaned on the counter, his face unreadable. "There's someone else." The room seemed to tilt. She placed the spatula down slowly. "Someone else?" she whispered. "Who?" "Aubrey. Aubrey Sloan." Kaylin's stomach dropped. The initials returned to her mind instantly. The bracelet, the scent, the silence, the shifts in his behavior. "Aubrey?" Her voice trembled. "She's why you've been distant." He didn't flinch. "She understands me in ways you don't." Kaylin blinked hard, fighting the sting behind her eyes. "I've been beside you for years. I supported you through everything. How can you say—" "Kaylin," he cut in, raising a hand, "you grounded me." That was good at first, but grounding can feel limiting when a person wants to grow. Her heart cracked. Limiting. Loving you was never limiting. Rowan's expression stayed cold. "She fits my world better. She fits my life better than you ever did." That sentence shattered something deep inside her. He slid the papers closer, pushing them across the counter, like they were nothing more than business forms needing signatures. "I've already arranged everything. I need you to move out within the week." The week. Her home. Her memories. Her marriage. Reduced to a deadline. Kaylin stepped back, swallowing the ache rising in her throat. "You're throwing away everything we built?" "We didn't build anything I want to keep," he replied, far too calmly. That was the moment Kaylin realized the marriage she had been fighting to. Save wasn't just dying. It had already ended for him long before she knew. She didn't say anything else. She couldn't. The pain was too raw, too sudden, too sharp. She simply turned off the stove, walked past him, and climbed the stairs to pack what she could carry. Her world had shifted in one conversation, and the man she once trusted with her heart had walked away without looking back. Kaylin sat on the edge of the bed that afternoon, her suitcase open beside her, and her hands resting motionlessly on her lap. The house felt different now, not because anything changed physically, but because every corner whispered a truth she had been avoiding for months. Rowan wasn't confused. Rowan wasn't overwhelmed. Rowan wasn't slipping away by accident. He had chosen someone else long before he found the courage to admit it. Kaylin let her eyes wander across the room, the same room where she and Rowan once talked for hours about plans, dreams, and future kids. The same room where he held her during late-night thunderstorms and whispered to her about fears he never shared publicly. She pressed her lips together, fighting the tremor in her chest. Love didn't disappear overnight. She knew that. She still felt pieces of it tucked inside her, pieces she wished she could rip out so the pain wouldn't be so sharp. But as much as she loved Rowan, she couldn't deny the truth staring at her. Love didn't end. Loyalty did. For months, she tried to rationalize the distance. She excused the silence. She forgave the late nights. She dismissed her own instincts in the name of giving him understanding. But understanding meant nothing when the person you're trying to reach isn't reaching back. She folded a shirt slowly, trying to keep her hands steady. The fabric reminded her of a weekend trip they once took to a quiet lakeside rental where they cooked together and danced barefoot in the living room. Rowan held her close that night, telling her he couldn't imagine a future without her. Yet here she was, packing that future into a small suitcase. Kaylin swallowed the ache forming at the back of her throat. Pain wasn't new to her. Life had thrown challenges her way before. But this kind of pain hurt differently. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was betrayal. It was the quiet realization that she had loved someone who dropped her the moment attention from another woman felt more exciting. She thought of the bracelet, the scent on his shirt, the clipped conversations, the cold tone, the way he no longer looked at her like she mattered. She hadn't lost her husband that morning in the kitchen. She lost him the moment he started giving pieces of himself to someone else and pretending she wouldn't notice. Kaylin wiped a tear that escaped, despite her best efforts. She didn't want to cry anymore, not over someone who didn't defend her, value her, or fight for what they built. She zipped her suitcase and stood up. This wasn't the end of her story. It was simply the moment she chose herself when he failed to choose her. As she walked down the stairs, she felt something shift inside her. Not relief, not closure, but clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when pain strips away illusions. Rowan didn't end their marriage because love faded. He ended it because loyalty, respect, and commitment were things he didn't know how to maintain without applause. Kaylin paused at the door, taking one final glance at the house. The memories here were real. The love she offered was real. But real love cannot survive where loyalty is absent. She stepped outside with her suitcase in hand, the air hitting her face like a reminder that the world beyond these walls still belonged to her, even if Rowan no longer did. This wasn't her defeat. It was her beginning. Kaylin had always believed that heartbreak would show itself through noise, shouting, arguing, slamming doors, broken things scattered across a floor that once held love. But the real pain came quietly. It arrived through simple moments that felt too heavy for the body to hold and too sharp for the heart to ignore. The first real blow came the afternoon Aubrey walked into the house, not just as Rowan's affair, not just as the woman behind the bracelet, but as the person Rowan now wanted to replace her with. Kaylin had gone back to the house 2 days after Rowan forced the divorce papers into her hands. She wasn't ready emotionally, but the practical things needed attention: clothes, documents, the laptop she kept in her office, sentimental items she didn't want to risk leaving behind. She moved slowly through the foyer, breathing through the sting that pressed deeper the longer she stayed. Standing near the doorway, she tried to hold herself together, even though every inch of the house reminded her of what she once believed her forever would look like. The quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the background. Birds chirped outside the back windows. The light filtered gently across the living room decor she once arranged with thoughtful hands. The home looked the same, but she wasn't the same. She heard the front door open and thought for a moment it might be Rowan returning from the office. She inhaled, preparing to keep her composure, but it wasn't him. Aubrey Sloane stepped inside as if she had been given the code long before Kaylin realized she would no longer live here. She held a set of keys in her hand, shaking them lightly with the confidence of someone who believed she deserved more than she earned. "Oh, you're still here," Aubrey said, closing the door behind her as casually as someone tossing a bag onto a couch. "I figured you'd already be gone." Kaylin felt a heat rise in her chest, not anger but something deeper, something that came from being disrespected in the place she once created memories in. "This is my home," Kaylin replied softly but firmly. "I still live here. Not for long." Aubrey smiled the way someone smiles when they've already rehearsed their victory. "Rowan wants me settled in. There's a lot to do." Kaylin swallowed tightly. "He could have told me you were coming today." Aubrey circled the kitchen island, her heels clicking on the hardwood, her gaze moving over appliances, artwork and decor with the critique of someone evaluating a property she planned to renovate. "He didn't think it mattered," she said simply. "You're moving out." Kaylin felt her breath catch. "This house was our life, our memories, our connection." Aubrey shrugged, flicking her hand. "People outgrow things." A pause hung between them, long enough for both women to feel its weight. Kaylin looked around the kitchen, remembering the day they signed the papers for this house. Rowan had lifted her into his arms, spinning her slowly, telling her he couldn't believe this would be the place they grew old together. She remembered how he admired the natural light in the living room, how he promised they would host family dinners, raise children, and create a place filled with warmth. It felt like another lifetime. Aubrey continued her inspection of the space, touching the counter Kaylin once wiped down every evening, examining the framed art she picked during a trip with her best friend, Brielle. "Oh, this will go," Aubrey announced, tapping a canvas with her manicured nail. "I'm thinking something more neutral. Your style is earthy." Kaylin blinked back, rising emotion. "Those came from local artists. They meant something to us." Aubrey raised an eyebrow. "To you, maybe." Kaylin clasped her hands together to keep them from shaking. She wasn't someone who fought through loudness or anger. She fought through steadiness, through keeping her dignity intact. She reminded herself that she wasn't losing value. She was losing someone who didn't appreciate it. Aubrey moved into the living room and paused at the custom-built shelf, holding small tokens of their life together. Books Kaylin collected from independent bookstores, photographs, souvenirs from trips, even a candle they bought at a street market on a spontaneous date night. "This is all going," Aubrey said with an easy wave. "Rowan and I like a cleaner look." Kaylin's heart tightened again. "You and Rowan?" The words felt foreign. "You don't get to plan this house like I never lived here." Aubrey's smile sharpened. "Well, Rowan asked me to make it feel like home. I'm just following his lead." Kaylin stared at her, not in shock anymore, but in understanding. A woman who enters another woman's home with entitlement has no concept of love. She has only conquest. Kaylin inhaled deeply, letting her mind drift into memories tied to the objects Aubrey wanted gone. She remembered the night Rowan kneeling in their backyard with a ring, asking her to marry him under warm patio lights, the way his eyes glowed with hope, the laughter that filled their house on their first Christmas together while they watched movies wrapped in blankets, the nights they stayed up late eating leftovers from the fridge because they didn't want date night to end. Those memories weren't items. They were pieces of her heart, and Aubrey wanted to erase every one of them. As Aubrey walked through the hallway, Kaylin followed her reluctantly, feeling every memory tug at her. "You don't have to erase everything," Kaylin said quietly. "This isn't just his home. It was ours." Aubrey turned, lifting her chin. "Correction, it was yours. Now it's mine." A slicing quietness settled between them. Kaylin took a step back, grounding herself. She wouldn't let this woman see the tears threatening to fall. Tears were private. Dignity was not. Aubrey strutted into the master bedroom, evaluating the space as if she were shopping. "Oh, I'll definitely redo this entire room. Your taste is so sentimental." Kaylin's gaze dropped for a moment. "This was where we planned our future." Aubrey laughed lightly. Well, plans change. Kaylin's words were soft, but strong. Yes, they do. While Aubrey dug through a fabric sample bag she brought with her. As if she had already assumed ownership, Kaylin's mind echoed Rowan's brutal confession. You softened me too much. She heard it again, fresh and cutting. As if softness was a flaw. As if grounding him was a burden. As if loving him fully was an inconvenience. Aubrey leaned against the dresser with a smirk. He said you made him feel too settled, too ordinary. Kaylin flinched. He said that? Of course, Aubrey said proudly. He said you made him feel tied down. Kaylin stood taller. That wasn't a flaw in her character. That was a flaw in his maturity. She didn't break. She didn't lash out. She didn't crumble. She stepped into herself, the woman she was before love, before heartbreak, before betrayal. Her voice steadied. I hope the comfort you find here is worth the cost. Aubrey crossed her arms. Oh, it's worth it. Kaylin didn't respond. Sometimes silence is more powerful than any insult. Before she left the room, she paused by the doorframe, letting herself take one last long breath of a space that once held her dreams. She didn't know then that life was preparing her for something she didn't see coming. Something bigger than the house, bigger than Rowan, bigger than betrayal. But she could feel a shift, a stillness that told her this wasn't the end of her story. It was the start of one. Kaylin returned to the house the following morning with one clear intention: pack only what belonged to her and leave before the weight of staying crushed her spirit entirely. She stood at the front door for a long moment, key trembling between her fingers. The house appeared peaceful from the outside, but the silence inside held memories she didn't know how to face. Memories that once wrapped her in security now felt like reminders of everything she lost without warning. She inhaled steady breath and stepped inside. The door clicked behind her, the sound echoing through the foyer. The home felt different today. Not cold like it did yesterday when Aubrey walked through, but hollow, as if Rowan's betrayal had emptied something the walls could no longer hold. Kaylin set her tote bag down and walked into the living room. Morning light fell gently across the decor she arranged with care during the early days of their marriage. She stared at the throw pillows, remembering the day they picked them out together. Laughing in the store because Rowan insisted on the softest ones he could find. She remembered how he lifted her into his arms when the furniture finally arrived, telling her, "This is us. This is our beginning." Now she was here packing the pieces of a beginning he no longer wanted. Her hands landed on the picture frames lined on the shelf. She picked one up, a photo from their first Christmas together. They wore matching pajamas, faces bright with joy as they decorated a tree full of ornaments chosen with intention. Her throat tightened. She placed the frame gently in one of the boxes she brought. She didn't want to keep most items, but the memories were part of her story, and she wasn't ashamed of the moments when love was genuine. One by one, she collected the sentimental things. A small heart-shaped ceramic bowl made by a local Chicago artist. The candle they bought at a street vendor in Atlanta after accidentally wandering through a block celebration. A handwritten note Rowan left for her on their 6-month anniversary that said, "You soften the world around me." The note hit her harder than she expected. Softness was something he once admired, but now labeled as inconvenient. She folded it gently and placed it inside her bag. As she moved through the room, she kept her steps measured. She refused to let bitterness take over. She wouldn't give Rowan or Aubrey the satisfaction of seeing her defeated. Dignity would be the one thing she left this house with, untouched, unshaken. She moved upstairs next, entering the master bedroom. Her chest tightened at the sight of the bed, where they once shared long conversations, laughter, and dreams whispered in the dark. The bedding was slightly wrinkled, a sign Rowan slept on his side alone. A part of her felt relief she wasn't there to witness how easily he adjusted to sleeping without her. Kaylin walked to the closet. Her dresses hung neatly where she left them, but the space felt wrong now. Too orderly, too untouched, the opposite of the chaos she felt inside. She pulled down 2 suitcases and began folding her clothes slowly, carefully, as if rushing would make the pain worse. Every garment carried a memory: the dress she wore to Rowan's cousin's wedding, the sweater he bought for her during a cold Chicago night, the sundress she wore when they toured this home for the first time. She packed them without lingering too long. A soft knock sounded on the doorframe. Kaylin turned, startled. It was the housekeeper, Mrs. Lowell, a kind woman who worked there since Rowan was a teenager. She held a basket of linens and paused when she saw Kaylin. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice heavy with sadness. "I didn't think you'd be here this early." Kaylin forced a small smile. "Just gathering my things." Mrs. Lowell set the basket down and walked closer. She took Kaylin's hands gently. "You deserved better than this," the woman murmured with sincerity only someone who witnessed everything could offer. "You gave him warmth. You gave this home warmth." Kaylin blinked back tears. "Thank you, really. If you ever need anything," the older woman said, squeezing her hand softly, "I'm here." "You're not alone." Hearing that broke something inside her. She hugged the housekeeper tightly, then stepped back, regaining her composure. She couldn't stay long enough to fall apart again. After Mrs. Lowell left, Kaylin packed the last of her clothes, toiletries, and a few treasured items. She zipped the suitcase and stared at it. Everything she owned, everything she could hold on to from this chapter, compressed into 2 bags. Her eyes scanned the bedroom one last time. She whispered, as if to herself, "I loved you, and that love was real." Then she turned off the light and walked out. Downstairs, she gathered her documents, her laptop, and her grandmother's quilt, the one patch of home she brought to her marriage. She folded it gently and held it against her chest for a moment. Its familiar texture felt like a reminder of who she was before the heartbreak. She reached for her purse when she heard the front door unlock. Her chest tightened when Rowan stepped inside. He paused mid-step, seeing the suitcases. His expression shifted, not to guilt, not to regret, but something almost dismissive, as if this entire situation were an inconvenience he wished would resolve itself quietly. "You're leaving today?" he asked. "I'm giving you what you want," she replied softly. "You said a week. I'm leaving early." He looked at her bags, then looked away. "Good. That makes things easier." Kaylin's hands tightened around the strap of her suitcase. She didn't respond. She didn't trust her voice not to quiver. Rowan stepped closer, running a hand through his hair. "I don't want this to be messy, Kaylin. You're making it harder than it needs to be." She stared at him. "Harder? Rowan, you broke our vows. You broke us." He didn't look ashamed. He looked inconvenienced. "We weren't working anymore," he said flatly. "Aubrey and we connect differently." Kaylin felt her heart bruise all over again, but she held her spine straight. "You chose attention over love. Just call it what it is." Rowan's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He had nothing left to defend. Kaylin lifted her suitcase. "Goodbye, Rowan. Goodbye," he replied, already turning away. Kaylin walked out before her resolve crumbled. She didn't look back, not even once. The door closed behind her with a finality that felt both painful and necessary. Outside, the cold air brushed her cheeks, and she took her first unsteady breath of freedom. This wasn't the ending she wanted, but she refused to let it be the end of her. After a deep breath, she loaded her luggage into her car and headed straight to the one place where she knew safety still lived. Brielle opened the door before Kaylin even knocked twice. Her cousin took one look at her tear-soaked face and pulled her into the tightest embrace she had felt in months. "Oh my God, Kay." Come in," Brielle whispered, rubbing her back. "You're safe now. You're safe here." Kaylin broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but the kind of break that comes when a woman stops pretending she's fine. She sobbed into Brielle's shoulder, clutching her cousin as if holding on to the last thread of stability she had left. Brielle guided her to the couch, wrapped her in a soft blanket, and handed her tissues. "Talk whenever you're ready, or don't. Just breathe for now." Kaylin wiped her cheeks. "I can't believe he did this to me." "I can," Brielle replied honestly. "Not because you deserved it, but because he didn't deserve you." Kaylin leaned her head back, eyes swollen. "I feel so stupid. I feel like I failed." Brielle turned toward her, voice steady and strong. "You didn't fail. He failed you. There's a difference." Kaylin shook her head slowly. "I gave that man everything. I thought I was enough." "You were enough," Brielle said firmly. "He just didn't know what to do with a woman who loved him without conditions." Kaylin let the words sink in. For the first time since the heartbreak began, she didn't fight them. She let them land exactly where they were meant to, on the part of her heart that needed to remember her value. The days that followed were heavy. Grief didn't come in waves. It sat with her, quiet but unrelenting. She cried when Brielle made breakfast. She cried while folding laundry. She cried while trying to watch TV, realizing nothing distracted her from the ache. Shame hovered around her too, not because she did something wrong, but because she had trusted someone who let her down so completely. At night, Kaylin lay awake listening to the soft hum of Atlanta traffic outside Brielle's window. She clutched her grandmother's quilt, letting it remind her of childhood, resilience, and the warmth of a life she once understood. Slowly, she began to rediscover herself, not through forced optimism, not through pretending she was okay, but through truth, through acknowledging the hurt, through accepting that her heart was wounded, through understanding that she wasn't broken, just bruised. And bruises heal. Kaylin journaled one night, writing words she didn't yet believe but needed to say. My worth isn't tied to the people who fail me. Love should lift, not diminish. Losing someone who doesn't value you isn't a loss. Her hand trembled as she wrote, but each sentence stitched a small piece of strength back into her. Brielle peeked into the room. You okay? Kaylin exhaled. I will be, and she meant it, not as forced hope, but as a small truth forming inside her. She didn't fail. She didn't fall short. She didn't lose value. She simply loved someone incapable of appreciating the depth of her heart. The first week in Brielle's apartment felt like walking through thick fog. Kaylin woke up each morning on the pull-out couch of her cousin's small Atlanta place, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember when her life stopped feeling like her own. The quilt from her grandmother was the only constant. She slept wrapped in it, clutching the edges like a lifeline. Brielle, on the other hand, moved through the tiny apartment like a storm of determined kindness. The second morning, she stood over Kaylin with a mug of coffee. Drink, Brielle said. We're not starting your new life on an empty stomach. Kaylin managed a weak smile, pushing herself upright. I'm not ready to be new yet. That's fine, Brielle replied. You can be hurt and healing at the same time. But you're not staying stuck. She meant it. Brielle worked as a creative director for a small media agency that specialized in campaigns for Black-owned businesses in Atlanta. Her world was color, movement, music, and community, and she was determined to pull Kaylin into it, one step at a time. The first night, Brielle made her favorite meal, fried chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens, and cornbread. The whole apartment filled with warmth and seasoning, making Kaylin's chest ache with familiarity. Smell that? Brielle said, stirring the pot. That's love on a stove. Kaylin sat at the small dining table, wiping her face with the back of her hand. It smells like home. That's the point, Brielle replied. You didn't lose home, Kay. You just lost an address. On Friday, Brielle took it a step further. I know you want to stay inside, she said, dropping onto the couch beside her. But you're coming with me tonight. No arguments. Kaylin frowned. Bri. Nope. Brielle cut in. There's a live band at this little spot on Edgewood. They're doing a neo-soul night. You don't have to dress up. You don't have to talk to anyone. Just sit there with me and remember that music still exists. Kaylin hesitated, then sighed. What if I cry in the middle of it? Then you cry, Brielle said. You're allowed to, but you won't cry alone. That night, they stepped into a cozy bar filled with warm lighting, the soft hum of conversation, and live instruments tuning in the corner. People of different ages and backgrounds filled the room, laughing, swaying, catching up after long weeks. The energy was gentle but lively. Kaylin took a seat at their small table near the back, her shoulders tense at first. Brielle ordered them mocktails and a plate of wings. When the band began to play, smooth bass, gentle keys, a voice that carried soul and hurt and hope all at once, Kaylin felt something loosen inside her. The lyrics spoke about heartbreak and moving on, about being undervalued and choosing yourself. Every line pressed gently against wounds she wasn't ready to show, but couldn't hide from anymore. You okay? Brielle asked over the music. Kaylin nodded, even as her eyes filled. I forgot what it feels like to enjoy something that isn't tied to him. That's why we're here, Brielle said. You were a whole person before Rowan. You're still a whole person now. By the second set, Kaylin found herself clapping along with the crowd. She even let out a small laugh when the singer cracked a joke between songs. It wasn't much, but it was something. Over the next several days, Brielle kept gently pulling her into life. Saturday morning, she took Kaylin to a local Black-owned bookstore. The owner recognized Brielle, greeting her with a hug. And who's this beauty? He asked, smiling at Kaylin. This is my cousin Kaylin, Brielle said proudly. She's brilliant, tech-savvy, and temporarily heartbroken. So we're filling her brain with stories instead of stress. The owner chuckled. You're in the right place then. He recommended books about healing, identity, and black women thriving in difficult spaces. Kaylin slid her fingers across the covers, feeling inspired and intimidated all at once. You don't have to fix everything today, Brielle told her. Just let yourself be fed by something that isn't pain. On Sunday, they streamed her mom's church service online. Kaylin's mother texted her during the sermon, "Baby, I love you. This is not your end. God still has something for you." Kaylin cried quietly on the couch, Brielle rubbing her back while passing her tissues. "Let it out," Brielle whispered. "That's how your heart makes room for new things." Slowly, through food, music, spaces filled with black joy and soft, ordinary moments, Brielle started reintroducing Kaylin to herself, not as Rowan's wife, not as the woman who got left, but as Kaylin Pierce, the girl from Chicago who loved community, who believed in equity, who brought light into rooms long before anyone ever put a ring on her finger. She wasn't happy yet, but for the first time since everything broke, she felt something that wasn't numbness, possibility. A week later, Brielle walked into the living room with her laptop open and a familiar gleam in her eyes. "Okay," she declared, dropping onto the arm of the couch. "I found something and you cannot say no." Kaylin narrowed her eyes. "That's not encouraging." "There's a community center on the south side," Brielle explained. "They run a tech club for middle and high school students, but the woman who normally leads the program just moved. They're looking for a volunteer who knows tech and cares about the kids." Kaylin's chest fluttered. "That sounds like a lot," she whispered. "That sounds like you," Brielle corrected. "You light up when you talk about tech and access. Every time you tell me about the programs you built back in Chicago, your whole face changes." Kaylin bit her lip. "I don't know if I'm ready to be needed right now." Brielle softened. "Kay, you were built to pour into people. That's who you are. But this time, you're not doing it to hold a man together. You're doing it for kids who actually benefit from your heart." That distinction landed deep. Brielle sent an email on Kaylin's behalf, with Kaylin sitting right beside her to approve every word. Within 2 days, the director of the center, Ms. Turner, responded with enthusiasm and asked if Kaylin could stop by for a visit. The morning of the visit, Kaylin almost backed out. She sat on the edge of the bed in Brielle's small guest space, staring at her simple professional outfit. "What if I can't be myself yet?" she asked. "You don't have to be your full self," Brielle said from the doorway. "Just bring the part of you that cares. That's more than enough." So Kaylin went. The community center was set in a modest brick building with murals on the outside walls. Young black kids in cap and gowns, fists raised, books and laptops drawn in vibrant colors. Inside, the lobby smelled like cleaning supplies and crayons, with kids' voices echoing from down the hall. Miss Turner, a woman in her late 40s with kind eyes and a powerful presence, greeted her with a warm hug instead of a handshake. "You must be Kaylin," she said. "Brielle talks about you like you're some kind of superhero." Kaylin laughed softly. "I promise I'm very regular." Ms. Turner shook her head. "If you're willing to give your time and skills to these kids, you're anything but regular." She walked Kaylin down the hall to the computer room. A handful of desktops lined the walls, some older, some slightly newer, a few in desperate need of repair. "We run coding basics, robotics, and digital literacy," Ms. Turner explained. "But we've been improvising since our last instructor left. The kids are hungry to learn, though." From the doorway, a group of middle schoolers peeked in. When they spotted Kaylin, one of the girls whispered loudly, "Is that her?" Miss Turner called them in. "Come say hi, y'all. This is Miss Kaylin." A shy boy in a hoodie stepped forward. "Are you really a tech person?" Kaylin smiled gently. "I am. I build programs that make systems work better for people who usually don't get access." "That sounds cool," another girl said. "Do you know how to make games?" "I do," Kaylin replied, a small spark lighting in her chest as she spoke. "And if I'm here long enough, I can teach you how to build yours." Their eyes widened. Excitement buzzed through the room. In that instant, something clicked back into place inside Kaylin, a part of her, identity she hadn't lost, even if heartbreak had made her forget it for a while. She spent the next hour observing their current lesson, asking questions, tossing out small suggestions. The kids were curious and blunt in the way young people often are. "Do you have a husband?" one boy asked suddenly. Kaylin hesitated for a moment. "No," she answered softly. "Not anymore." "Good," a girl muttered. "Men be stressing people out." The room broke into laughter. Even Kaylin smiled, the sound bubbling up from a place that hadn't felt joy in too long. By the end of the visit, Miss Turner asked, "So, can we count on you?" Kaylin looked at the kids, their hopeful faces turned toward her. Her instinct wanted to pull back to protect herself from any more responsibility, but her heart moved forward. "Yes," she said, "once or twice a week to start. Let's build something solid." Walking out of the center, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. That evening, sitting at Brielle's kitchen table, she pulled out her notebook and began sketching out lesson plans. Basic coding concepts, real-world examples, career paths in tech beyond what kids usually hear. She poured herself into it quietly, not to distract from pain, but to use it. Her heartbreak hadn't stolen her ability to create. It had simply forced her to redirect where she poured her energy. This time, it wouldn't be into a man who saw her as an accessory. It would be into kids who saw her as a path. Healing didn't arrive in a straight line. Some days, Kaylin felt strong. Other days, she felt like her chest might cave in if someone even said Rowan's name. One Monday afternoon, after a successful class at the community center where 2 kids built their very first functioning apps, Kaylin left feeling proud. She walked outside into the Atlanta sun, smiling as she replayed the kids' excitement in her mind. But that evening, when she scrolled through her email, she stumbled on a newsletter featuring Ellis Development's latest project in Chicago. The headline read, "Ellis Development hosts gala with new partner, socialite Aubrey Sloan." Her stomach twisted. There they were in the attached photo, Rowan in a sharp tux, Aubrey in a gown, smiling for cameras. The same cameras that once captured Kaylin at his side. Brielle walked in to find her staring at the screen. "What happened?" Brielle asked, already sensing the shift. Kaylin turned the laptop slightly. "They look happy." Brielle sighed. "They look expensive." "That's not the same thing." Kaylin closed the laptop slowly. "Why does it still hurt this much?" "Because you're human," Brielle said, sitting beside her. "You loved him. You built with him. You don't just flip that off like a switch." That night, Kaylin cried quietly again, not because she wanted him back, but because she had to mourn the version of him she thought existed. A few days later, the pain eased when one of her students, a girl named Jada, ran up to her after class. "Miss Kaylin," she said out of breath, "I showed my mom the project we did. She said she's proud of me. She never said that about school before." Kaylin felt tears threaten again, but this time for a different reason. "Jada, that's amazing," she replied, kneeling to her level. "You should be proud too. You're doing real work." Jada smiled shyly. "I like learning from you. You make it feel possible." That word landed gently in Kaylin's heart. Possible. Her days became a mix of high and low moments. Highs, kids excitedly calling her name when she entered the computer room. Miss Turner pulling her aside to say parents had noticed a change in their children's confidence. Brielle throwing movie therapy nights with silly rom-coms and blankets piled on the couch. Lows, waking up from dreams where she was still in the Lake Michigan house, only to remember she no longer lived there. Accidentally passing a commercial property sign in Atlanta with the Ellis logo during a drive. Moments when her chest tightened for no clear reason, just from the memory of how deeply she once trusted Rowan. At times, she questioned whether she was really moving forward, but each time she walked into the community center and saw a room full of kids ready to learn. Each time Brielle refused to let her retreat into isolation. Each time her mother checked on her and reminded her that heartbreak doesn't cancel destiny. A truth grew stronger inside her. Rowan walked away from her life, but she had not walked away from herself. She was still Kaylin. She still had a calling. She still had love to give, just nowhere near the man who didn't value it. And slowly, in the middle of that messy, uneven process, she began to believe she would be okay. Not instantly, not perfectly, but truly. A few weeks after Kaylin began volunteering, Brielle convinced her to attend a local networking mixer for Black professionals in Atlanta. The event was hosted at a renovated warehouse turned event space. Warm lighting, exposed brick, a DJ spinning. Soft R&B tracks and community leaders scattered across the room discussing business, art, and opportunities. Kaylin walked in feeling unsure. Her confidence was still rebuilding itself, piece by piece, and large rooms full of strangers had never been her comfort zone. She clutched her small purse, reminding herself she didn't need to impress anyone tonight. She was only here because Brielle insisted it would be good for her. "Just mingle a little," Brielle whispered, nudging her gently. "Nothing stressful, nothing deep. Just be present." Kaylin nodded, offering a tiny smile. She drifted toward a display table for a local nonprofit focused on digital inclusion. She picked up an informational card, reading the details carefully. Anything involving community tech work always caught her attention. A familiar voice came from behind her. "Didn't expect to see you here." Kaylin froze for half a second before turning around. Declan Ward stood a few feet away, holding a drink, his expression soft with surprise. Clean-cut, dressed in a simple blazer and jeans, he looked approachable, the same gentle energy she remembered from the few times they'd interacted during her marriage. He had been one of Rowan's business consultants years ago. Smart, observant, quiet. A man who didn't force conversation but always carried depth behind his eyes. "Declan?" Kaylin whispered. "Wow. Hi." He smiled slowly. "Hey, Kaylin. It's good to see you." She hadn't seen him since before Rowan shifted into the version of himself she barely recognized. Declan had stepped back from the Ellis projects long before the divorce, and she hadn't known why. "I didn't know you still lived in Atlanta," she said. "Moved back 2 years ago," he replied. "Consulting feels more meaningful here, less performance-based." The word hit her chest in a way she didn't expect. "What about you?" he asked gently. "How have you been?" Kaylin hesitated. She didn't want to dump her heartbreak onto him, nor did she want to pretend everything was perfect. "I'm finding my way," she said truthfully. Declan nodded, as if he understood more than she said aloud. "You look tired," he said carefully, not as judgment but concern. "Not worn out, just carrying a lot." Kaylin exhaled softly. "It's been a challenging few months." He didn't pry. He didn't push. He just nodded again, acknowledging her without asking for details she wasn't ready to share. "You being here means you're trying," Declan said. "That's already something." And for the first time that night, Kaylin felt a small lift inside her. Not joy, not excitement, but relief. Relief that someone saw her without asking her to explain herself. Declan guided her toward a quieter corner of the event, where a small catering station served fruit cups and miniature sandwiches. "Hungry?" he asked. "A little." "Good," he said. "Let's eat before someone traps us in a 30-minute conversation about business strategies." Kaylin laughed softly, genuinely, and followed him. They filled small plates with fruit and sat at a high-top table near the back of the venue. Declan didn't bombard her with questions. Instead, he asked about her volunteering at the community center. "I heard you've been working with kids again," he said. "Miss Turner mentioned a new instructor who's been getting great feedback." Kaylin blinked. "Wait, you know Miss Turner?" Declan nodded. "She's one of my clients. I help her with funding proposals for expansion." Kaylin let out a small breath. "She's incredible. The kids adore her." "They adore you too," he replied, then added gently, "I can tell. You brighten when you talk about them." Her cheeks warmed. She hadn't expected anyone to notice. Declan continued, "It makes sense, you know. You always had this ability to make a space feel hopeful." Kaylin swallowed. "I don't know if I feel hopeful yet." "That's okay," he said. "Hope isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet at first." She studied him for a moment. He wasn't saying anything romantic or intense. His tone was calm, slow, almost careful, as if he knew she was fragile and didn't want to cause a single crack. "Can I ask something?" she said. "Sure. Why did you stop working with Rowan?" Declan leaned back, exhaling with a quiet sigh. "We didn't align anymore. The direction he started taking didn't feel healthy." Kaylin nodded slowly. She didn't ask further. She didn't need to. Declan switched the topic. "What about you?" he asked softly. "What do you need right now?" The question startled her. No one had asked her that since the divorce. Kaylin looked down. "I don't know." "That's fair," he replied. "When life collapses, you don't rebuild in one day. You start with something small, something steady." "Like the community center?" she asked. "Exactly," he said. "Something that reminds you you're still valuable." His tone was reassuring without pressure. He didn't act like a man trying to step into her vulnerability. He acted like someone who respected it. "Declan," she said quietly, "thank you. Really. I didn't expect to feel comfortable tonight." He smiled again. "You don't owe me comfort, Kaylin. I'm just glad you're not carrying everything alone right now." Her throat tightened. Not painfully, but gratefully. After a while, the DJ lowered the music, and small groups formed across the room. Kaylin and Declan stayed by their table, talking about harmless topics, technology trends, community programs, childhood stories. She laughed more in 2 hours than she had in 2 months. But eventually, the conversation drifted gently toward Rowan, not by Kaylin's intention, but through something Declan said while discussing workplace culture. You know, he said thoughtfully, people don't always change because they want to. Sometimes they change to impress the wrong crowd. Kaylin looked at him slowly. Declan continued, Rowan used to be grounded when he worked with us, transparent, curious, but over time, he started caring more about how he looked than who he was. Kaylin remained quiet, letting his words settle. Declan wasn't attacking Rowan. He wasn't gossiping. He was explaining a truth he had seen long before she recognized it. He built this image he thought he needed, Declan said, but the cost was becoming someone he didn't recognize, and someone other people couldn't recognize either. Kaylin felt her chest tighten, not from pain but from understanding. He pushed you away, Declan added softly, not because you lacked anything, but because you reminded him of the real version of himself, the version he was afraid wasn't enough for the world he wanted to impress. Kaylin blinked, stunned. I never wanted him to be anything except who he was. I know, Declan said quietly, but he didn't choose who he was. He chose who he wanted people to think he was, and that choice came with losses. Me, Kaylin whispered. Declan nodded once. Yes, but then he leaned closer, not physically but emotionally. But you didn't lose anything by being yourself, he said. You lost someone who didn't appreciate your strength. That's not your failure. A slow, steady breath left Kaylin's lips. For the first time since the divorce, she didn't feel like a discarded woman. She felt like a woman whose worth Rowan couldn't rise to meet. Declan watched her with quiet understanding. You're rebuilding, Kaylin. I can see it already. Maybe you can't see it yet, but I can. Her eyes softened. Do you really think so? I don't think so, he replied. I'm certain. A warmth spread through her chest, not romantic, not rushed, not overwhelming, just healing, the kind of warmth that reminded her she was still standing, still valuable, still alive. When the event ended, Declan walked her to the exit. If you ever need to talk, he said gently, just reach out. No pressure. She nodded. Thank you, Declan. Truly. As she stepped into Brielle's car outside, Kaylin realized something profound. Rowan hadn't been the foundation of her life. Her own heart had always been the foundation, and it was learning how to beat again. She was not the woman who left her home defeated. She was becoming the woman who would rebuild from ashes, not because someone saved her, but because someone reminded her she still had something worth rising into. At first, Rowan told himself the tension in the house was just an adjustment period. He tried to look at everything with the same confident lens he used in business. New investment, new life. That was how he framed Aubrey and the changes that came with her. He convinced himself the chaos was temporary. But the more time passed, the more he realized this wasn't temporary. This was who she really was. The first shift showed up in small domestic decisions. The living room needs a complete upgrade, Aubrey said one afternoon, flipping through an interior design catalog at the kitchen island. All this personal touch stuff is dragging the mood down. She had already started removing the items Kaylin left behind that weren't sentimental enough to box up. The soft blankets, the framed art from local artists, the books on community development and technology, all gone. In their place appeared glossy coffee table books, abstract decor pieces, and oversized vases chosen purely for aesthetics. Rowan walked in from a conference call and paused at the sight of a few workers hauling out an entire shelf. What are you doing? He asked. Upgrading, Aubrey said brightly. We can't host movers and shakers in a room that looks like a cozy lesson on community outreach. Rowan's brows pulled together. That shelf was custom built. Aubrey didn't look up from her catalog. Exactly. That's the problem. Custom for a life you're not living anymore. He let it go. He told himself this was part of moving forward, of embracing a new phase. But day by day, the home became less of a sanctuary and more of a showroom. Furniture changed. Colors changed. The entire mood of the space shifted away from warmth toward something sharper. Then the spending began to escalate. Luxury shopping bags started piling up in the bedroom. Boxes of designer shoes, handbags, jewelry, and clothes arrived almost daily. Aubrey enrolled them in exclusive memberships, private dining clubs, and social circles that revolved entirely around status. You spent $20,000 in 2 weeks, Rowan said one evening, studying the credit card statement. Aubrey smiled. sliding onto his lap as if that would erase the numbers. "You're a Ellis. People expect a certain standard. We're not regular. This is excessive," he muttered. "It's alignment," she corrected. "If you want to keep your influence strong, you have to look like you live the life you sell." Her reasoning came with a hint of manipulation that Rowan didn't yet want to name. She began hosting gatherings almost every weekend. The house that once held small, intimate dinners now echoed with loud parties. Guests he'd never met before wandered freely through the rooms, drinks in hand, taking photos of themselves in the remodeled living area. Rowan watched from the edge of the events, nursing a drink and forcing smiles as people complimented his upgrade. Kaylin was nice, one man said with a shrug at a cocktail mixer, but she didn't fit this environment. "Aubrey gets it." Rowan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He heard that sentiment more than once, phrased differently by different people. "She's great for your brand. She looks like she belongs in your world. She's the kind of woman people expect at your side in the media." Aubrey overheard these comments and soaked them in. She wasn't just living in his house. She was building her image off his name. She dropped his last name in every conversation. She tagged his company in social media posts that didn't involve work. She told her friends, "We're expanding in some exciting ways," as if she were part of the decision-making. The disrespect started surfacing in the way she spoke about his past. "Don't talk about the old setup," she said once when he mentioned the way Kaylin used to organize the kitchen. "It makes you sound sentimental." He bristled. "There's nothing wrong with remembering." "You're a leader, baby," she said, draping her arms around his shoulders. "Leaders move forward. They don't hang on to memories that make them look soft." Soft, that word, once a comfort when tied to Kaylin, now sounded like an insult when Aubrey used it. He ignored the discomfort as long as he could. He told himself this was the life he'd chosen. A woman who fit in at galas, whose friends were plugged into the same social circuits, who could charm anyone in a room with practiced ease. But each day, it felt less like a partnership and more like he had signed a contract he didn't fully read. It didn't take long for the turbulence inside the house to leak into his professional world. The first sign was subtle. His finance team requested a meeting about personal and corporate spending. "We've noticed an increase in expenditures tied to your personal accounts," his CFO said carefully, sliding a report across the table. "A lot of this overlaps with events that involve business contacts, but the lines are getting blurred." Rowan glanced at the numbers. Lavish restaurant tabs, private club charges, designer purchases logged as client entertaining. He recognized the dates. Most of them matched nights Aubrey insisted their presence was good for the company's exposure. "Is this a problem?" he asked, defensive without meaning to be. "It could become one," the CFO admitted. "If investors start asking questions, we want to make sure everything is clean." He nodded, promising to watch it more closely. But he didn't confront Aubrey immediately. He knew how that conversation would go. "You're worried about a few receipts," she would say, laughing it off. "Do you want to look like you're penny pinching while your competitors invest in their image?" At first, he kept quiet. He tried to cut back logically, skipping one event here, declining another invitation there. But Aubrey resisted every slowdown. "We need to be seen," she insisted one night as she adjusted one of her dresses in the mirror. "If you're not present, people forget you, and then someone else takes your place." He couldn't deny that image mattered in his industry. It always had. But something about the intensity with which she clung to that concept unsettled him. Soon, the whispers started. At a real estate conference, a longtime associate pulled him aside. "Everything okay back home?" the man asked, voice low. Rowan frowned. "What do you mean?" "Well," the associate said, choosing his words, "people talk. They've noticed you've been stretching yourself thin. New partner, new lifestyle, new expenses. They're wondering if your priorities shifted." "Business is fine," Rowan replied sharply. "I didn't say it wasn't," the man said gently. "Just be careful. Your reputation has always been about being solid. You don't want that to change." The comment stayed with him. A few days later, a board member requested a private conversation. "Some of us are concerned," she said, tapping a polished nail against her tablet. "Your personal life is bleeding into company perception. These parties, these posts, these new connections, they may not be working in your favor." "Those are exaggerated," he argued. "Are they?" she asked calmly. "There's talk that you're letting your new relationship guide business decisions, that you're more focused on keeping up with a flashy lifestyle than maintaining steady leadership." Rowan felt his stomach churn. That's not who I am. Then make sure your actions keep matching the man we believed in, she replied. On the surface, he kept his posture straight, his tone controlled, his responses measured. But inside, a storm was starting. He began to notice the dissonance everywhere. The house felt less like a home and more like a stage. His calendar was filled with events that looked impressive but accomplished little. Conversations that used to center on strategy now revolved around optics. One night, after a particularly draining board meeting, he came home earlier than expected. The house was lit, music pulsing from the living room speakers. He heard laughter. Not his, not belonging to anyone he recognized. He set his keys down and followed the sound. Aubrey was in the living area with two women he'd met once at an event. Empty wine glasses sat on the coffee table, designer shopping bags scattered around them. They were mid-conversation, the kind of conversation people only have when they don't think they're being heard. I told you, Aubrey was saying, her tone smug. You just have to find a man who needs to feel important. Stroke his ego, act like his world is the only one that matters, and he'll sign anything. The other women laughed. Rowan's chest tightened. Come on, one of them said. You make it sound too simple. It is simple, Aubrey insisted. You should have seen him when we started. He was bored, comfortable, married to a woman who made him feel calm instead of powerful. I gave him a rush he didn't even know he was missing. Rowan felt a chill. He bought you a whole house, the second woman said. That alone is impressive. Please, Aubrey replied with a scoff. That house is just the beginning. Once I make sure everything legally favors us, I can maneuver anything I want. The words hit him like a blow. Maneuver. Favor us. Simple. He stood there, hidden behind the corner, his heart pounding against his ribs. They say he's so smart, Aubrey continued. But at the end of the day, he's like any other man who grew up needing approval. You figure out his weak spot, you play to it, and you own him. His breath caught. Owned. He stepped back before she noticed him, his head swimming with disbelief and clarity crashing together. The pieces clicked into place. The way she pushed him toward a more extravagant life, the way she framed every concern as an attack on his status, the way she positioned herself as the reason his brand looked strong. It wasn't partnership, it was strategy, and he was the asset. He didn't confront her that night. He couldn't. Not yet. Instead, Rowan walked quietly to his home office, closed the door, and stood in the dark, letting the words replay in his mind. He was bored, comfortable, married to a woman who made him feel calm instead of powerful. You figure out his weak spot, and you own him. He sank into his leather chair, resting his elbows on his knees, pressing his hands into his face. How did I get here? He whispered to no one. The man who once prided himself on making sharp decisions had been played. He'd let someone use his insecurities as leverage, and he had willingly handed over the life he built with a woman who had never manipulated him, not once. He thought of Kaylin, of how she greeted him after long days with patience, not demands, of how she challenged him, but never belittled him, of the way she believed in his ability to use his power for good, not for spectacle. Back then, coming home felt like stepping away from noise. Now, the house roared with noise even when it was quiet. Later that night, when the guests left and Aubrey finally retreated upstairs, Rowan stayed downstairs alone. He walked into the living room and looked at it properly for the first time since she renovated it. The color scheme was sleek and cold. The art was expensive and empty. There was no trace of the life he used to know, no quilt, no photo collages, no hint of the community-centered heart Kaylin brought with her. He crossed the room slowly, his eyes landing on a spot above the fireplace. There used to be a framed photo there, the shot from their first anniversary by Lake Michigan, the same one Aubrey promised to take down later. It was gone, replaced by a piece of abstract artwork that meant nothing to him. His chest tightened with an ache he hadn't allowed himself to feel until now. He suddenly remembered the sound of Kaylin's laughter echoing through the house, the smell of her cooking on Sunday afternoons when she tried new recipes, the way she sat on the couch, laptop open, working on proposals to bring tech, opportunities to youth who had never imagined themselves in that world. He closed his eyes. I traded her for this, he murmured. He thought of the way he'd spoken to her in the kitchen. She fits my life better than you ever did. We didn't build anything I want to keep. The shame of those words burned hotter than anything he'd felt in years. Regret didn't creep in gently. It slammed into him, His throat tightened. His eyes stung. He fought the urge to dismiss his emotion the way he'd been conditioned his entire life, but he was too tired to numb himself now. He sat on the edge of the couch and dropped his head into his hands. He saw Kaylin's face in his mind, the hurt in her eyes when he told her he wanted a divorce. The way she didn't scream, didn't beg, just looked at him with a quiet, broken disbelief. "What did I do?" he whispered. He stayed there for a long time, the room growing darker as the night deepened. The house, once filled with warmth, now felt like a cold museum dedicated to poor choices. Every untouched surface, every carefully styled object, every curated piece of decor reminded him that he wasn't living in a home anymore. He was living in evidence, evidence of betrayal, evidence of weakness, evidence of a man who chose ego over love, image over integrity. He couldn't sleep that night. He tossed and turned, replaying scenes from his marriage in relentless detail. The first time Kaylin showed him the plans for her tech program and he told her, "You're going to change lives." The night they stayed up late, eating leftovers and planning a trip they never took. The way she used to curl up next to him during storms, trusting him enough to rest. He had taken all of that and discarded it for someone who openly viewed him as a transaction. The floor under his feet no longer felt steady. For the first time, Rowan wondered if he had not only lost Kaylin, he wondered if he had lost himself. And in that quiet, dark house, full of things he never actually wanted, one harsh realization settled over him like a weight. He didn't just break her life. He broke his own. Healing did not rush itself into Kaylin's life. It moved slowly, the way sunlight crawls through blinds in the early morning, quiet, steady, unforced. And as she continued volunteering at the community center, something inside her began to shift. Not a dramatic shift, a gentle one. A shift that whispered, "You are still needed. You still matter." 2 months after she began teaching at the center, Ms. Turner called her into the office. "You've become the heartbeat of this place," she said, handing Kaylin a folder. "The parents have been talking. The kids have been bragging. Everyone is noticing the difference." Kaylin blinked. "Difference?" Ms. Turner smiled warmly. "Confidence, attendance, curiosity. The way these kids ask questions now, it's because of you." Inside the folder were letters, handwritten notes from her students. "Miss Kaylin makes me feel smart. She believes in us. She told me I could build something great." Kaylin covered her mouth as her eyes filled with tears. Not tears of sadness, tears of recognition. She was beginning to see the woman she had been before Rowan dimmed her light. Miss Turner placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I want you to consider joining us as a consultant for our digital growth initiative. You'll help train instructors, expand our curriculum, and help us build something sustainable." Kaylin sat straighter. "Me? Lead a whole initiative?" "Yes," Ms. Turner said firmly. "Why not you?" The question hit her hard. Why not her? She had been shrinking herself because of one failed marriage. She had been mourning the version of Kaylin, who loved Rowan, instead of honoring the version who still had a calling. One Saturday afternoon, Brielle forwarded Kaylin an email from a local women in tech organization. It read, "We heard about your work at the community center and would love to have you speak at our empowerment brunch for Black women in tech." Kaylin reread the message 3 times. "Brie, why did they reach out to me?" she asked. "Because your impact is loud," Brielle said, "even when you feel silent." The brunch was held in a modern co-working space with natural lighting and shared tables filled with laptops, planners, and coffee cups. The room buzzed with women who looked like Kaylin, Black women navigating corporate spaces, breaking ceilings, building dreams. When it was her turn to speak, she stood behind the podium, palms trembling slightly. But when she looked into the audience, she saw a reflection of her younger self, women who needed reassurance that their voices mattered. So she spoke from her heart. Not about heartbreak, not about Rowan, not about losing her home. She spoke about resilience, about representation, about feeling invisible in spaces where decisions were made by people who didn't understand communities like hers, about why she was committed to creating opportunities for youth who grew up doubting whether they belonged in tech at all. The room leaned toward her. When she finished, the applause felt like a wave of support that lifted her spirit off the ground. Afterward, several women approached her. "You reminded me why I started pursuing tech. Your confidence gave me confidence. Thank you for showing us what strength looks like." Kaylin walked to Brielle afterward, her chest full, her eyes shining. "I didn't expect it to feel like this," she said. Feel like what? Brielle asked. Like I'm coming back home to myself. Word spread quickly about her talk. Soon she received invitations to join panels on diversity in technology, mentor young Black women entering STEM fields, assist nonprofits developing educational outreach, consult with small tech startups focused on social impact. Every new request added another brick to the foundation she was rebuilding within herself. With each meeting, workshop, event, and mentoring call, Kaylin felt something she hadn't felt in months: self-love. Not in the romantic sense, not in the self-care trend sense, but in the raw, honest sense of acknowledging her own value. She realized she had spent years pouring herself into Rowan's life, supporting his dreams while shrinking her own. But now she had something she hadn't had in a long time: purpose that wasn't tied to anyone else. At one corporate outreach event hosted by a tech firm in downtown Atlanta, Kaylin stood on stage alongside two seasoned leaders in STEM. She was the youngest speaker there and also the one with the least formal corporate titles. But when she talked, the room leaned in. After the panel, a young woman approached her. "Miss Kaylin, I started in tech because I wanted to build things that matter, but I've been doubting whether I belong. Hearing you today reminded me that I do." Kaylin felt her throat tighten. "You absolutely belong. Don't ever let the environment convince you otherwise." More women gathered around her. They asked about confidence, career steps, mentorship, overcoming bias. Kaylin realized something important. Her journey wasn't just about teaching kids anymore. It was about empowering women who were navigating spaces where they often felt unseen or undervalued. Through their questions, their gratitude, and their stories, Kaylin rediscovered an appreciation for the strength she had always carried, even on days she felt weak. Healing doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself in small moments. When Kaylin picked out clothes in the morning and didn't feel weighed down by sadness. When she looked in the mirror and didn't see loss reflected back, she saw potential. When she taught her students and felt pride instead of pain. When she shared laughter with Brielle without feeling guilty about joy returning to her life. One evening, Kaylin returned home from a mentoring session and sat quietly at Brielle's dining table. She poured herself a cup of tea and allowed stillness to surround her. She touched her chest gently, noticing the absence of the constant ache she had felt weeks ago. "I'm healing," she whispered to herself. Not fully, not completely, but undeniably. She realized something profound. She no longer needed Rowan's validation. She no longer needed to question her worth. She no longer needed to shrink herself to fit into someone else's expectations. She was finally choosing herself again. Declan didn't become part of Kaylin's healing overnight. He didn't try to fill a space that wasn't ready. He didn't push. He didn't chase. He simply showed up with gentleness, consistency, and respect. About a week after the networking event, Declan texted, "I'm dropping off donations at the community center. Want me to grab you a snack from that cafe you like?" Kaylin smiled at her phone for the first time in days. She replied, "A smoothie would be nice." He showed up 20 minutes later, handing her the smoothie along with a warm expression. "How are you today?" he asked, not casually, but with intention. Kaylin shrugged, taking things one day at a time. "That's enough," he said. They sat together in the hallway outside the computer lab, talking about everything except Rowan. Declan kept the topics light unless Kaylin shifted them deeper. He made her laugh, but not loudly. He made her think, but not painfully. He made her feel seen, but without pressure. Weeks passed, and Declan became a quiet part of her routine. Sometimes he helped rearrange the computer stations so the kids could work in pairs. Sometimes he brought snacks for her students. Sometimes he drove her home when Brielle had late-night deadlines. One evening after class, Kaylin lingered by her car, visibly drained from a difficult day. Declan approached slowly. "Long day. Just emotional," she admitted. One of the girls shared something personal. "I wasn't expecting it." He leaned on the car beside her. "You hold a lot of space for people." "I try," she said. "That's what makes you special." She looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes were soft, his posture relaxed. There was no demand, no expectation, just presence. It was the first time a man made her feel safe in a long time. One rainy evening, they stayed late, cleaning up after a workshop. The rain hammered the roof, giving the center a calming hum. Kaylin sighed, sitting on a table for a brief rest. "I didn't know rebuilding would take this much effort." Declan stood in front of her, hands in his pockets. Rebuilding anything takes effort. But you're not doing it alone anymore. Her breath hitched slightly. Do you ever think I stayed too long in that marriage? He shook his head gently. No, you loved him. Love isn't weakness, Kaylin. He made me feel like it was. That's because he feared the version of you who expected depth. Not everyone can rise to meet that kind of love. Kaylin felt something shift in her chest. Declan wasn't flattering her. He wasn't comforting her out of attraction. He was telling the truth. Truth she had avoided saying aloud. Their closeness grew in moments that didn't declare themselves loudly. When Declan carried heavy boxes for her without asking. When he listened to her explain code and genuinely wanted to understand. When he insisted on walking her to her car for safety but didn't act possessive. When he remembered the names of her students and asked about them. One day, he said something that made her heart soften completely. You don't have to be strong every day, Kaylin. You're allowed to rest. No man had ever said that to her before. One afternoon, after finishing a workshop, Kaylin became overwhelmed while reviewing her lesson plan. Declan found her wiping tears quietly at her desk. I'm sorry, she whispered, embarrassed. Don't apologize for being human, he said. He pulled a chair beside her, not touching her, not crowding her, just sitting near enough to show support. After a moment of silence, he spoke again. For what it's worth, the woman I see coming back to life is remarkable. Her eyes met his, and in them, she saw a reflection she hadn't seen in a long time, a woman worth loving. They started sharing regular lunch breaks, often sitting at a park near the center. Declan always let her set the pace. If she wanted to talk, he listened. If she wanted silence, he offered it. If she wanted to laugh, he joined her. He never compared himself to Rowan. He never asked for more than she could give. He never acted entitled to her healing. One day, after a long walk around a quiet neighborhood, Kaylin stopped and said softly, I'm scared to care again. Declan nodded. I'd be surprised if you weren't. She looked down. What if I choose wrong again? Declan tilted his head. You didn't choose wrong the first time. You chose a man who wasn't ready for the weight of real love. And you think you are? She whispered, half teasing, half vulnerable. He didn't rush to answer. I think, he finally said, that if you ever chose me, I'd spend every day making sure your heart felt safe. Her breath trembled, not because she was falling, but because she realized falling didn't have to hurt. Declan didn't fix her. He didn't save her. He didn't replace anything she lost. But he did something far more meaningful. He showed her she was still capable of forming healthy connections. He reminded her that intimacy isn't supposed to feel like walking on glass. He taught her that emotional safety matters more than status. He showed up consistently without trying to impress her. Through his presence, Kaylin learned something she didn't know she needed to relearn. She deserved tenderness. She deserved patience. She deserved someone who paid attention without needing applause. And she deserved a love that didn't erase her identity, but supported it. Kaylin didn't expect the knock at Brielle's apartment that evening. She had just finished preparing lesson materials for her next tech class, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor with her laptop open, when a heavy, urgent knock echoed through the space. Brielle peeked through the peephole first. Her expression changed instantly. Her shoulders tightened. Her jaw set. Oh, no, she muttered. Kaylin looked up. Who is it? Brielle turned toward her, voice low and steady. It's Rowan. The name hit Kaylin's chest like cold water. She stood very slowly, not rushing, not trembling, just steadying herself before walking toward the door. Brielle opened it only halfway, blocking the entrance with her body. What do you want? Brielle asked with sharp restraint. Rowan stood in the hallway looking nothing like the polished man he had always portrayed himself to be. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, dark circles bruised the skin beneath his eyes, and his expression carried something Kaylin had never seen on him before. Shame. I need to talk to her, Rowan said quietly. Please. Brielle didn't move. She doesn't need anything from you. Kaylin exhaled, calm but alert. Let him in, Brie. It's fine. Brielle hesitated but stepped aside, though she kept her arms crossed, watching him like someone watching an unpredictable storm. Rowan stepped inside slowly, as if the room itself demanded humility. He looked around at the small, lived-in space, so different from the mansion he forced her out of. He swallowed hard before finally meeting Kaylin's eyes. Kaylin, he whispered. She didn't respond. She waited. Rowan rubbed a hand over his face, unable to hold her gaze for long. I don't know where to begin. Try honesty, Brielle snapped from behind Kaelin. He flinched. I'm not here to fight, Rowan said softly. I'm here because I made a mistake, a huge one, and I need to fix it. Kaelin's expression remained neutral. What exactly do you want to fix? Rowan looked at her desperately. Us. The silence after that was heavy. Kaelin felt her breath settle. No anger rose. No sadness pulled at her. Just clarity. There is no us, Rowan, she replied. He took a shaky breath. Please, just hear me out. Brielle opened her mouth, but Kaelin lifted a hand, signaling her to let him speak. What do you want to say? Kaelin asked. Rowan stepped a little closer, but kept distance as if he was afraid of crossing an invisible line. Aubrey, she wasn't who I thought she was. He laughed bitterly under his breath. Or maybe she was, and I just refused to see it. Kaelin stood still. She spent excessively. She lied constantly. She used me to gain access to circles she wasn't invited into before. Everything she did was about her image, her status, her ambitions. He swallowed, eyes lowering. I overheard her laughing with her friends a few nights ago, bragging about how easy it was to manipulate me, about how predictable I was, about how she never loved me. She only wanted the life I could give her. He shook his head slowly. She said she planned to secure everything she could before moving on. Brielle scoffed under her breath. Sounds familiar. Rowan looked at Kaelin again, voice trembling. I was foolish. I was weak. I let my insecurity make decisions for me. Kaelin's expression didn't change. I pushed you out of our home, Rowan continued. I humiliated you. I threw away the best thing in my life because I wanted approval from people who don't care about me. I broke a marriage because of my pride, and now I have nothing. Still, Kaelin remained silent. Rowan's voice cracked. Aubrey left. She took money, items, contacts. She drained everything she could, and she walked out laughing. He pressed a hand against his forehead. I deserve it, I know that, but losing her didn't hurt me. He finally lifted his eyes. Losing you did. Kaelin inhaled slowly, but didn't shift her posture. She absorbed his words with a calm that surprised even her. Rowan took one unsteady step closer. Kaelin, I'm sorry for everything, for the lies, for choosing someone else, for not appreciating who you were, for believing I needed anything beyond the love you gave. His voice cracked again. I don't expect you to forgive me, I need you to know that I see it now. I see everything I ruined, Brielle muttered, too late, under her breath. Rowan wiped his eyes, struggling to steady himself. If there is any part of you, any part that can give me a chance to fix what I destroyed, I'm begging for it. His shoulders slumped, his composure completely gone. The once confident man who walked through life with polished assurance now looked small, fragile, unanchored. But Kaelin wasn't moved by desperation, because desperation wasn't love. It was regret. And regret comes after the damage is already done. What do you want, Rowan? Kaelin asked quietly. He whispered, You. Kaelin stepped back half a step, not from fear, but from clarity. Rowan's face crumpled. Kaelin, please, he murmured. I can be the man you needed. I'll go to counseling. I'll rebuild trust. I'll do whatever it takes. She didn't flinch. She didn't soften. She simply watched him unravel. You didn't just break the marriage, he said, his voice cracking. You broke yourself trying to love me, and I let you. I let you carry everything alone. I let you feel unseen. I let someone make you feel replaceable. His voice lowered to barely a whisper. I should have protected you, not hurt you. He covered his face with both hands, trembling. Kaelin watched quietly, because this wasn't her burden anymore. Kaelin breathed in deeply, letting everything settle, the past, the pain, the truth, and the final collapse of the illusion she once held of the man before her. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, controlled, peaceful. Rowan, she said, look at me. He lifted his head slowly, eyes red, expression raw. You're apologizing because your world collapsed, Kaelin continued. Not because you suddenly realized my worth. That's not true, he started. It is true, she said, softly but firmly. Rowan's mouth closed. You came here because Aubrey left you empty, she said. But you left me empty long before she left you. He flinched. You waited until your life became unbearable to remember my value, Kaelin said. But love doesn't work like that. Respect doesn't work like that. Marriage definitely doesn't. Rowan swallowed. I know. I'm not asking you to forget, just to let me try again. Kaylin shook her head slowly. You didn't lose your marriage, Rowan. He frowned. What do you mean? She stepped closer, not emotionally, but with the strength of a woman who finally understood herself. You lost me. The words hit him harder than anything Aubrey did, anything the board said, anything life had thrown at him in months. Kaylin continued with unwavering clarity. You lost the woman who prayed for you. You lost the woman who believed in your ideas. You lost the woman who made that house feel like home. You lost the woman who supported your dreams even when you forgot hers. Tears slipped down Rowan's cheeks. You didn't lose a marriage, she said. You lost a partner. He looked shattered. Kaylin took a breath. And you didn't lose me because of Aubrey. You lost me because you stopped choosing me long before she showed up. Silence filled the room. Brielle's eyes glistened, watching Kaylin stand in her power. Rowan whispered, I don't know how to live with this. That's not my responsibility anymore, Kaylin replied. He reached out slightly, not touching her but pleading. Please, don't give up on us, he begged. There is no us, Kaylin said gently. There hasn't been for a long time. Rowan's shoulders collapsed as he took in her words. Kaylin didn't hate him. She didn't resent him. She simply outgrew the hurt he offered. You'll wake up one day, she said softly, and understand that losing someone who loves you without conditions is the biggest loss a man can face. Rowan wiped his face, looking down at the floor as if he couldn't bear to meet her eyes. She moved toward the door and opened it. This conversation is over, she said. Rowan hesitated, but eventually walked toward the exit. As he stepped out, he turned one last time. Kaylin, I really did love you. Kaylin nodded. I know, she said, but you didn't protect the love you had. He lowered his head and walked away, his footsteps fading down the hallway. Kaylin closed the door gently and leaned against it, not weak, not broken, but victorious in a way she never thought she could be. Brielle rushed to her, pulling her into a tight hug. You handled that like a queen. Kaylin exhaled. I didn't handle it. I accepted it. And that acceptance became her peace. Bestie. Before we move forward, please hit that like button, drop a supportive comment, and make sure you're subscribed. Your engagement helps keep these powerful stories alive and reaching more people who need them. The night Rowan showed up at Brielle's apartment and walked back out of her life, something inside Kaylin settled. Not instantly, not magically, but deeply. She had finally spoken the truth her heart refused to carry silently anymore. You didn't lose your marriage, Rowan. You lost me. Those words stayed with her, not as a harsh line, but as a boundary. A line she should have drawn long ago. A line that made space for something new to grow. Days passed. Then, weeks. And in that time, Declan continued to do what he'd been doing even before Rowan came back. He showed up. Not as a savior, not as a replacement, just as a steady, respectful presence. One Thursday evening, after a long day at the center, Declan offered to drive her home. Instead of going straight to Brielle's apartment, they took a detour. Come on, he said, glancing over at her from the driver's seat. There's a spot I want to show you. They drove toward downtown, pulling into a small public parking lot not far from the Beltline. Declan led her up a short path until the skyline came into view, Atlanta's lights glowing against the early evening. Sky, traffic humming below and people walking, joggers passing with headphones, couples strolling hand in hand. They stopped at a railing overlooking the view. This is where I come when my mind gets loud, Declan said. Helps me remember the world is bigger than whatever problem I'm obsessing over. Kaylin crossed her arms lightly, taking in the sight. It's beautiful. Yeah, he replied, but his eyes rested on her instead of the skyline. She didn't see it. She was too busy breathing in the moment. I used to have a view from the house, she said quietly. Floor-to-ceiling windows, but I don't think I ever really saw it the way I'm seeing this tonight. What's different? He asked. She thought about it. This doesn't feel like something I have to perform inside. It just exists. With or without me, he nodded slowly. Sometimes freedom is realizing the world doesn't revolve around the person who hurt you. She let that sink in. They stood side by side for several minutes, not speaking, just sharing. The air, the lights, and the silence that didn't feel heavy. For the first time in a long time, Kaylin felt safe standing next to a man. A week later, they sat at a picnic table in a community park near the center. Kids played on swings nearby, parents chatted on benches, and the air smelled faintly like grilled food from a nearby vendor. They had grabbed takeout from a black-owned spot that Brielle recommended, a small restaurant that served lemon, pepper wings, catfish, and mac and cheese that tasted like it came straight from somebody's auntie's kitchen. They ate from cardboard trays, laughing at how messy the wings were. "You have sauce on your chin," Declan said, smiling. Kaylin wiped quickly. "Oh no, not the chin." He chuckled. "Relax. You're allowed to be human, you know." She rolled her eyes playfully. "I've been trying that lately. It's new." After a moment, her tone softened. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Anything," he replied. "I'm scared of making the same mistake," she admitted. "Of trusting another man, giving him real access to my heart, then waking up one day realizing I didn't see him clearly." Declan didn't rush to respond. He chewed thoughtfully, swallowed, and set his fork down. "That fear makes sense," he said. "You're not wrong to feel that way." She searched his face. "You're not going to say something like, 'Not all men are like that.'" "No," he said gently, "because your experience with him is real. It shaped you. Denying that would be dishonest." She exhaled with relief. "Thank you. But," he added, "I will say this, you're different now. The woman who chose him is not the same woman standing here today. You see more. You require more." Her eyes glistened. "You really believe that?" she whispered. "I see it every day," he replied. "The way you set boundaries at the center, the way you protect your peace, the way you speak up for those kids. You're not a woman who will ignore red flags anymore." She swallowed. "What if my heart still wants to make excuses for people?" "Then I'll remind you of what you told Rowan," Declan said. "You didn't lose your marriage. You lost me." Her breath caught. "You heard about that?" she asked. "Brielle told me," he admitted. With pride, Kaylin looked down at her hands. "That was the first time I put myself first in a long time." Declan smiled softly. "It won't be the last." Healing in the ordinary moments. Their connection grew not through dramatic declarations, but through ordinary routines. He waited with her after evening classes so she didn't lock up the center alone. She sent him articles about tech initiatives she thought he'd appreciate. He sometimes sat in the back of her workshops, quietly observing, clearly admiring her teaching. She brought him snacks when he stayed late at the center to help MS Turner with budget proposals. They started to know each other's little details. He learned that she loved Chicago-style popcorn. She learned he was allergic to pineapple, but used to pretend he wasn't because he hated being difficult at group dinners. He learned that thunderstorms calmed her. She learned that jazz instrumentals helped him think. One evening, a storm rolled through Atlanta while they were still at the center. Rain poured against the windows, thunder rumbling in the distance. "You okay?" Declan asked. Kaylin sat near the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. "Yeah. I like this weather." "Really?" he asked. "It makes me feel honest. Like the sky stopped pretending everything was fine." He smiled at that. "You talk like a writer, you know." She laughed. "I talk like someone who's been through a lot." He sat down across from her. "You're not just what you've been through, Kaylin." She didn't reply right away, but the words stayed with her. As time went on, Kaylin began to notice subtle shifts in herself whenever she was around Declan. With Rowan, she had often felt she had to manage his moods, anticipate his needs, or adjust her tone depending on how stressed he was. With Declan, she never felt like she had to shrink or twist her personality to keep the peace. She could just be. Dinner in the city. One Friday night, Declan texted, "No pressure at all, but if you're free, I'd love to take you to dinner, just as two people who enjoy each other's existence." She smiled at the phrasing, "two people who enjoy each other's existence." Not convince you to be mine, not make things official, just company. She replied, "Okay, where?" He picked her up outside Brielle's building, dressed neatly, but not overdressed. They drove toward Midtown and parked near a cozy black-owned restaurant that served Southern fusion. Fried, green tomatoes with remixes, shrimp and grits, peach cobbler that melted under a scoop of vanilla ice cream. The space had exposed brick, dim overhead bulbs, and a playlist full of R&B classics. "This place is one of my favorites," Declan said as they sat in a booth. The owner started in a food truck. "Now look at this." Kaylin glanced around, acknowledging the staff, The customers, the framed photos of the owner's journey on the wall. Feels like a place built from real stories, she said. Exactly, he replied. Thought you'd appreciate that. They ordered dinner and talked easily. Not once did she feel pressured to perform. She laughed without wondering if it was too loud. She shared stories from her childhood in Chicago, and he listened like he cherished every detail. At one point she grew quiet, stirring the ice cubes in her drink. "What's on your mind?" he asked. She hesitated. "I keep waiting to feel unsafe, to feel like this is going to flip into something painful." He nodded slowly. "You're bracing yourself." "Yes, that's understandable," he said. "But I need you to know something." She looked up at him. "I'm not here to rush you," Declan continued. "If all we ever are is friends, I'll still be grateful I got to know this version of you." Her throat tightened. "You mean that?" "I don't say things I don't mean," he answered. She relaxed again, just a little, enough to finish her meal without that familiar knot in her chest. Love that feels safe. Over time, Kaylin started to notice patterns. Declan never used her vulnerability against her. He never compared her to other women. He never made her feel silly for needing reassurance. One afternoon, after a busy week, she sent him a text she wouldn't have allowed herself to send months ago. "Today was rough. I know you're busy, but can you just say something kind?" He replied within minutes. "You are stronger than this moment. You are worthy of softness, rest, and love that doesn't make you guess. If no one told you today, you are doing an incredible job just existing and trying again." She felt tears prick her eyes. Not from sadness, from being spoken to with care. Later that evening, they met at a small green space near the Beltline. People biked past them. Families pushed strollers. Dogs tugged leashes toward trees. They strolled along the path, side by side, occasionally brushing shoulders. "Thank you for earlier," she said. "No need to thank me," he replied. "You're allowed to ask for what you need." "That still feels new," she admitted. "What? Asking?" "Yeah, I used to feel like my needs were inconvenient." He paused mid-step, turning to face her. "Your needs are not a burden, Kaylin," he said firmly. "To the right person, they're an invitation to care." Her eyes shimmered. She held his gaze longer this time. In his eyes, she saw something she had never truly seen in Rowan's: steadiness not built on ego, interests not built on control, affection not built on ownership, just a quiet, patient desire to honor her heart. And that's when it truly clicked. Love wasn't supposed to make her feel small. Love wasn't supposed to silence her. Love wasn't supposed to strip her of identity. Love was supposed to feel safe. And around Declan, safety didn't feel like a compromise. It felt like the standard. The shift from friendship to something deeper didn't happen in one conversation. It happened gradually, in glances, in shared jokes, in small acts of service, in the way they began to instinctively check in on each other. But eventually, the moment came when words had to match what their hearts already knew. One mild evening, Declan invited her to a small rooftop gathering hosted by one of his friends. A low-key hangout with music, lights strung overhead, and a clear view of the Atlanta skyline. She almost said no, but Brielle nudged her. "Go. You're allowed to be happy, Kay." So she went. The rooftop wasn't crowded. A few people sat on outdoor couches, talking and laughing. A portable speaker played soft music. Someone grilled on a small electric grill in the corner. Declan was waiting near the railing, leaning against it, shoulders relaxed. "You made it," he said, smiling as she approached. "You sound surprised," she teased. "A little," he admitted, but pleasantly. They spent the evening in easy conversation with his friends. Everyone treated her kindly, not as an accessory on his arm, but as someone they genuinely wanted to know. At one point, she slipped away from the group and walked toward the far end of the rooftop, drawn to the way the city lights blinked in the distance. Declan followed a moment later. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," she said. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how different this feels," she admitted. "Being around people who don't expect me to perform. Being near a man who doesn't treat me like a status piece." He swallowed, moved by her honesty. "You deserve that. At a minimum." She turned to face him. "Why have you been so patient with me, Declan?" He didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer, not invading her space, but closing enough distance to make the air between them feel more intentional. Because you're not a project, he said. You're a person, a whole one, and I know what it feels like to give too much too soon and regret it. I never want to be the reason you feel rushed or unsafe. Her chest tightened in the best way. He took a gentle breath. Can I be honest tonight? She nodded slowly. Please. His eyes didn't leave hers. I care about you, Kaylin, he said. Not just as someone I enjoy spending time with, not just as someone I admire. I care about you in a way that's deeper than friendship. Her heart thumped hard. He continued, voice calm but earnest. I like the way your mind works. I like the way you pour into your students. I like how you don't sugarcoat your story, but you also don't let it turn you into someone bitter. I like how you show up for people, even after everything you've been through. He swallowed. And I would be lying if I said I didn't want the chance to love you. The word hung in the air. Love. He didn't say it with pressure. He didn't say it with conditions. He simply laid it down between them, like an offering. But, he added, I only want that if it's something you feel ready for. I won't push. I won't disappear if your answer is not yet. I value you too much to risk the parts of you that are still healing. Tears filled her eyes. Declan, she whispered. You have no idea what it means to hear that kind of care, to be considered at that level. I've watched you choose everyone else for years, he said softly. I just want you to know it's okay to choose yourself, and if that path ever includes me, I'll be grateful. She laughed softly through her tears. How are you this emotionally intelligent? I've lived, he said with a small smile. Made my own mistakes. The difference is I learned from them before I lost the right people. His words echoed inside her. She turned back toward the skyline, breathing in slow. I don't want to make a decision out of fear, she said. Good, he replied. I also don't want to stay stuck in a story that ended, she continued. I already closed the chapter with Rowan. For good. I'm not holding space for him anymore. Declan nodded, listening. I've spent so much time defining myself by what he did to me, she said. But lately, when I look at my life now, my work, these kids, my speaking, my family, you, her voice softened. I realize I'm not just the woman who was left. I'm the woman who got back up. He watched her closely. And I've been asking myself, she went on quietly, what does a woman who gets back up choose? She turned to him, eyes clear despite the tears. She chooses what honors her. She chooses what feels safe. She chooses what doesn't require her to lose herself to keep it. His chest rose and fell slowly. What are you saying, Kaylin? She stepped a little closer, only a little, enough that the space between them felt charged. I'm saying, she began, that if I ever choose to love again, it won't be to fill a void. It won't be to prove I've moved on. It won't be about trying to replace what I lost. Her hand brushed his. It'll be because I found something healthy, something real, something that allows me to be fully me without apology. His fingers gently curled around hers, waiting. And for the first time, she whispered, I look at you, and I see that possibility. Declan's breath caught. Are you sure? He asked. She nodded, no hesitation. I'm not choosing you over Rowan. I closed that door already. I'm choosing you over the version of me who thought she had to beg for love. His eyes filled with emotion. He lifted her hand slowly, giving her enough time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he pressed a soft kiss to the back of it, not claiming her, not marking her, just honoring her. Thank you, he murmured, for trusting me with your heart. She smiled through fresh tears. Thank you for showing me I could trust again. They didn't rush into anything physical. They didn't need to. That quiet decision, shared under the Atlanta sky on a small rooftop, was intimate enough. She leaned into him, resting her head lightly against his chest. He wrapped an arm around her with careful gentleness, not clutching, not gripping, just holding. For the first time in her adult life, love didn't feel like a performance. It felt like home, not a house, not a status, not a lifestyle, a person. And even more importantly, it felt like she had finally come home to herself. Bestie, let's breathe together for a second. We started with a woman standing in her own living room, being told by another woman to move out of the house she helped build, while the man she loved handed her papers like she was a business error he was correcting. But that's not where her story ended. This is where we step back and pull the lessons out, for you, for every woman, watching, for every heart that has ever been mishandled and blamed for it. Rowan thought he was trading softness for excitement. He thought he was trading stability for a lifestyle that looked good on the outside. He forced a divorce. He let Aubrey walk into the house like she owned it. He allowed her to remove every trace of the woman who once made it feel like a home. But a house is not a home if there is no respect inside it. There is no honesty in the foundation. There is no loyalty between the people who live there. He tried to rebuild with deceit as the base material. And what happened? The gatherings were loud. The decor was expensive. The photos looked impressive. But the structure? It was hollow. The people who praised his new life weren't there when the truth hit him. They weren't there when the board questioned his judgment. They weren't there when he heard Aubrey brag about using him. The only person who had ever truly stood beside him in quiet seasons was the same one he shoved out of the door, Kaylin. A relationship built on cheating, lies, and ego does not last. It may glitter for a season, but sooner or later, the floor gives way. Lesson: if someone invites you into a life that requires them to betray another person, understand clearly they will eventually betray you too. Kaylin could have begged. She could have argued, shouted, broken things in that kitchen when he pushed those documents into her hand and told her another woman fit his life better. She didn't. It wasn't because she was weak. It was because deep down, something in her still knew, I am more than the way you are treating me right now. Her heart broke. Her world shook. Her home was taken, but she did not negotiate her value. She didn't say, I'll change everything about myself just to keep you. Tell me how to be less so you can feel bigger. I'll accept anything, just don't leave. Instead, she moved out with what she could carry, walked into Brielle's apartment, and allowed herself to feel pain without editing it. So many women are trained to bargain with their worth. If I just accept less, maybe he'll stay. If I endure the disrespect quietly, maybe we'll eventually be okay. If I don't speak up, maybe he'll realize one day and fix it. Bestie, that's not love. That's self-abandonment. The right person will not require you to shrink, twist, or erase yourself to be chosen. Rowan came back broken, not because life was unfair, but because the consequences of his actions finally arrived at his own door. He lost money. He lost peace. He lost a sense of who he was. But the deepest pain he faced came from seeing the woman he once took for granted, standing whole without him. Kaylin didn't stalk his social media. She didn't scheme to ruin his reputation. She didn't plot to embarrass him. Her revenge didn't involve payback. Her revenge was recovery. She rebuilt her career. She became a voice in tech, in community work, in empowerment spaces. Black women in corporate rooms found strength listening to her. Kids at the community center saw possibility every time she walked in. She attracted a man who saw her clearly and treated her like a human being, not a prop for his image. While Rowan's new life cracked and crumbled, hers expanded. That's what happens when you heal instead of chase closure from someone who is still confused. The greatest response to disrespect is not proving you're still lovable. It's building a life so grounded, so joyful, so aligned with who you truly are, that their choices no longer define any part of your future. Let's be honest. When Rowan ended the marriage, Kaylin felt like she had failed. She questioned her value. She wondered if she wasn't interesting enough, glamorous enough, aligned enough. But walking away from that house, from his world, from his shallow standards, that was not a loss. That was release. If he had stayed in that same mindset, you know what would have happened. She would have kept dimming her light. She would have kept excusing his distance. She would have collapsed her whole life into his schedule, his image, his mood. She would never have stepped fully into the work she was born to do. Instead, heartbreak pushed her into a deeper version of herself, into purpose, into community, into spaces where she was celebrated, not tolerated. Sometimes the thing that breaks you is the same thing that frees you. You don't always see it at first because the tears blur everything. But when the fog starts to clear, you realize I didn't just lose him. I found me. Let's list who she was before. A loving wife, a supportive partner, a builder of community programs, a woman with dreams she sometimes placed on the back burner. Now look at who she became after. A leader in her field, a mentor to girls and women who needed an example, a consultant strengthening nonprofit programs, a woman with boundaries, standards, and emotional clarity, a partner who chooses a man based on character, not social position. She did not become hard. She did not decide all men are the same. She did not lock her heart away forever. But she raised her standards. Love must feel safe. Partnership must be mutual. Communication must be honest. Loyalty must be consistent, not just when it's convenient. A woman who has walked through betrayal, done the work to heal, and chosen to grow instead of crumble, she is powerful in a way that scares people who profit from her being insecure. Kaylin didn't just survive, she transformed. And now, anyone who wants access to her life has to meet her at that level. You might not have a billionaire husband. You might not be in a luxury house. Your heartbreak may not look like Kaylin's story scene for scene, but the feelings, the confusion, the sense of being replaced, the questioning of your own worth, those are real for so many women watching this. So here's what this story is whispering to your heart. If someone chooses someone else after you gave them real love, your love is not suddenly less valuable. If someone walks out on you to chase a louder life, they didn't upgrade. They ran from the maturity commitment requires. If you are healing right now, you are not behind. You are rebuilding. And one day you'll wake up and realize you are no longer rehearsing the moment they left. You are planning the future you want. The day you stop centering the person who hurt you and start centering the person you are becoming, that's the day your story truly shifts. Bestie, if you're still here with me, let's talk heart to heart. Because this isn't just a story about Kaylin, Rowan, Aubrey, and Declan. This is about you, your standards, your healing, your next chapter. Ask yourself, have I ever stayed too long in a situation where my soul was shrinking? Have I ever called it loyalty when it was really fear of being alone? Have I ever let someone convince me I was too much or not enough at the same time? And then ask, what would my life look like if I started choosing peace over chaos? What would my love life look like if safety became my new minimum? Who could I become if I stopped begging people to see my value and started living like I already know it? You don't have to answer right away, but let those questions sit with you. Because this channel, Harrison Love Stories, is not just about drama and entertainment. It's about reflection. It's about growth. It's about recognizing yourself in these characters and walking away with lessons your future self will thank you for. Bestie, go to the comments and talk to me. Have you ever been in Kaylin's position, loyal to someone who traded you for attention? What was your turning point? Which lesson hit you the hardest from this story? Drop a comment like, Bestie, I'm choosing myself from today. My take-home lesson is, healing is my power. I've been Kaylin. I'm ready to be the healed version of her. Your comment might be the one that encourages another woman reading silently, thinking she's alone. If this story touched you in any way, tap that like button so YouTube knows to send it to more people who need it. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. Share this video with a friend, a sister, a cousin, a group chat, anyone who needs a reminder that walking away from disrespect is not weakness. When you like, comment, and share, you're not just helping the channel grow. You're helping build a community of women and story lovers who are learning together, healing together, and refusing to settle together. Here on Harrison Love Stories, we are telling stories about women who walk through real pain and still stand, exposing shallow love that looks glamorous but feels empty, highlighting men like Declan, emotionally aware, respectful, steady, reminding you that love with standards is possible. Every video on this channel is designed to entertain you, make you feel seen, leave you with wisdom you can carry into your real life. You're not just a viewer, bestie. You're part of the Harrison Love Stories family. If you loved this, stay close, because our next story is already loading. We're diving into another modern American love story with a powerful woman everyone underestimates, a wealthy man who has to decide between comfort and character at a twist that will make you sit up and say, no way he did that. So if you want more billionaire drama with lessons, more black women winning after heartbreak, more realistic romance where love and accountability go hand in hand, make sure you're subscribed and the bell is on. You do not want to miss what's coming next.